3 words. That's all it took to shatter Daniel Carter's world. I miss you, meant for his 8-year-old son, accidentally sent to Vanessa Whitmore, the CEO known for ending careers with a single glance. Within minutes, she appeared at his desk, leaning close enough for him to feel her breath, and whispered words that made his blood run cold. Say it again. What happened next triggered a chain of events that would expose office secrets, ignite dangerous rumors, and force Daniel to fight not just for his job, but for everything he'd built as a single father. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments and hit that like button. Let's see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The morning of Tuesday, March 14th, started like any other forgettable day in the life of Daniel Carter, which is to say, it started too early, moved too fast, and offered no mercy for the exhausted. The alarm screamed at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before it was supposed to, because Lucas had been playing with the settings again. Daniel's arm shot out from under the covers, slapping the nightstand twice before finding the phone. He silenced it, then lay there in the darkness of his small bedroom, listening to the familiar sounds of the apartment building waking up around him. Mrs. Chen upstairs running water. The couple next door arguing in muffled Spanish. The distant groan of the elevator shaft. 3 more minutes, he told himself, just 3 more minutes. But fatherhood had long ago stolen the luxury of lingering in bed. From down the hall came the soft padding of small feet, and Daniel smiled despite his exhaustion. He knew what was coming. The bedroom door creaked open. Dad? I'm awake, buddy. Lucas Carter, 8 years old, with his father's dark hair and his late mother's gentle eyes, padded into the room wearing mismatched pajamas, superheroes on top, dinosaurs on the bottom. He climbed onto the bed without invitation, as he did every morning, and nestled against Daniel's side. It's Tuesday, Lucas announced, as if this revelation carried great significance. It is indeed Tuesday. That means art class. That's right. Can I bring my new markers? Daniel pulled his son closer, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and innocence. The expensive ones Aunt Marie sent for your birthday? They're not that expensive, Lucas argued, which was exactly what Daniel had said when Marie had apologized for the extravagant gift. All right, but you're responsible for them. If they get lost, I know, I have to use my allowance to replace them. Lucas rolled his eyes with the dramatic exasperation only an 8-year-old could muster. You tell me that about everything. Because everything costs money, and money doesn't grow on trees. You also say that about everything. Daniel laughed, ruffling his son's hair. Come on, troublemaker. Let's get breakfast going. The morning routine unfolded with practiced efficiency. Daniel made scrambled eggs while Lucas poured cereal, a compromise they'd reached after the great breakfast argument of January. Lucas ate both somehow, his appetite never ceasing to amaze his father. Daniel managed coffee and a piece of toast, standing at the counter, mentally reviewing his schedule. Staff meeting at 9. The Henderson portfolio needed review by noon. Quarterly reports due by end of week. Johnson's presentation prep. The Williams account analysis. His own performance review coming up next month, which meant updating his documentation, ensuring every file was pristine, every number justified. The weight of it pressed down on his shoulders even as he watched Lucas swing his legs at the kitchen table, chocolate milk mustache forming as he drank. This was the balance. This was the tightrope. Work enough to provide, but not so much that he missed moments like this. Push hard enough to advance, but not so hard that he came home too empty to be a father. Dad, you're doing the thing again. Daniel blinked. What thing? The staring thing. When you look at me but you're thinking about work. Lucas studied him with unnerving perception. Your eyes get all far away. Sorry, buddy. I'm here. I'm present. Promise? Promise. They finished breakfast, brushed teeth, gathered backpacks and briefcases. Daniel checked Lucas's homework folder twice, made sure the new markers were safely stored, and verified that the permission slip for next week's field trip was signed and ready. Then they headed out into the cold March morning, Daniel's hand automatically finding Lucas's as they walked the 3 blocks to Riverside Elementary. The schoolyard bustled with children and parents, a chaos of voices and laughter, and the occasional tearful goodbye from the kindergarten area. Lucas spotted his best friend Tyler near the swings and suddenly transformed from sleepy child to boundless energy. "Can I go?" Daniel crouched down to his son's level, adjusting the backpack straps that had twisted. "Hey, what's our deal?" "Make good choices, be kind, pay attention, and remember you love me even when you're not here," Lucas recited dutifully. "That's right, especially that last part. What else?" "You'll be here at 3:15 right by the flagpole, and if you're late, I wait with Mrs. Patterson." "Good man." Daniel pulled him into a tight hug, knowing he probably had about 6 more months before Lucas decided he was too old for public displays of affection. "I love you, Lucas, more than anything in this world." "Love you too, Dad, even more than Xbox." "Wow, that's serious." Lucas grinned and took off toward Tyler, backpack bouncing with each step. Daniel watched until he disappeared into the crowd, then checked his watch. 7:52. If he caught the 8:05 bus, he'd make it to the office by 8:40, giving him 20 minutes before the meeting. The commute downtown took 43 minutes, every one of them familiar. Daniel knew which subway car tended to be less crowded, which doors opened closest to the exit at his stop, how many steps from the station to the building entrance. He knew the security guard's name, Marcus, 2 daughters in college, the best coffee cart outside, Mario's, corner of 5th and Madison, and exactly how long the elevator took to reach the 15th floor, average 37 seconds, though the middle elevator was faster. Carter and Associates occupied floors 14 through 16 of a glass and steel tower that looked like a dozen others in the financial district. The firm specialized in investment portfolio management, which Daniel explained to Lucas as helping people make smart choices with their money. A vast oversimplification, but accurate enough for an 8-year-old. Daniel had worked here for 6 years, starting as a junior analyst and working his way up to senior portfolio specialist. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't what he dreamed about as a kid, but it was stable. It paid well enough to support his son, and it came with health insurance that covered the asthma medication Lucas needed. That was enough. It had to be. The 15th floor greeted him with the usual sounds of productivity, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the low hum of conversation. His desk sat in a cluster of 8 others, all facing inward in the open floor plan that some consultant had convinced management would foster collaboration and innovation. Mostly it fostered distraction and the inability to take personal phone calls without everyone hearing. "Morning, Daniel." Patricia Chen looked up from her monitor, reading glasses perched on her nose. She'd been with the firm for 15 years and had a framed photo of her cat where most people kept pictures of family. "Morning, Patricia. How was your weekend?" "Watched my niece's soccer game. They lost 5-1, but she scored the 1 goal, so she's thrilled." Patricia smiled warmly. "How's Lucas?" "Growing too fast. I swear his shoes don't fit for more than 3 months." "They never do. My sister says the same thing." Daniel settled into his chair, powering up his computer and organizing the files he'd need for the meeting. Around him, the office continued its morning rhythm. Tom from accounting arguing with someone on the phone about expense reports. Sarah and Jennifer whispering about their weekend plans. Michael bragging loudly about his gym routine to anyone who'd listen. And then there was Brandon Keller. Brandon sat 2 desks over, perfectly styled hair and expensive suit making Daniel's off-the-rack attire look shabby in comparison. He'd joined the firm 8 months ago, some Ivy League degree and family connections that got him a fast track to positions it had taken Daniel years to reach. He was talented, Daniel had to admit, but he was also ambitious in a way that felt dangerous, like he viewed every colleague as a competitor to be eliminated rather than a teammate. "Carter." Brandon barely looked up from his phone. "Henderson Portfolio. You finished that analysis?" "Meeting's at 9. I'll present then." "Better be good." "I heard Whitmore's sitting in." Daniel's hands paused over his keyboard. "Whitmore? Vanessa Whitmore?" "The one and only," Brandon smirked. "Apparently she wants to observe departmental operations more directly. You know, make sure we're all earning our paychecks." A ripple of nervous energy passed through the nearby desks. Vanessa Whitmore was a legend in the building, though Daniel had only seen her a handful of times in 6 years. She'd taken over as CEO 3 years ago at the unprecedented age of 32, daughter of the firm's founder, and had immediately begun restructuring everything with ruthless efficiency. The stories about her were whispered like cautionary tales. She'd fired the entire marketing department in her first month. She'd rejected a multi-million-dollar deal because one number in the presentation was off by a decimal point. She'd supposedly made a senior vice president cry during a quarterly review and felt no remorse about it. Daniel had never spoken to her directly. Their worlds didn't intersect. She operated in the executive suites on the 16th floor, behind closed doors and assistants who screened everyone. He worked in the trenches, doing the actual analysis that made the firm's reputation possible. But now she was coming to his meeting. "Don't look so worried, Carter." Brandon's voice dripped with false sympathy. "I'm sure you'll do fine. Unless you screw it up, then you're probably fired." "Thanks for the encouragement. Just being realistic. Whitmore doesn't tolerate mediocrity." Brandon stood, smoothing his already perfect tie. "Anyway, I've got to prep. Try not to embarrass the department." He walked away and Patricia caught Daniel's eye, shaking her head. "Don't listen to him. Your work is excellent. You'll be fine." "Right. Fine." Daniel tried to believe it. The next hour disappeared into preparation. He reviewed his slides, checked his numbers 3 times, rehearsed his key points. The Henderson portfolio was solid. He'd spent weeks on the analysis, identifying opportunities and risks, building comprehensive models. The client would benefit from his recommendations. The firm would benefit from the increased returns. But would it be enough to impress Vanessa Whitmore? At 8:47, his phone buzzed, a text from Lucas's school. "Reminder, art class today. Students should bring supplies." Daniel smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. Lucas would be showing off those new markers right about now, probably trying to trade colors with Tyler or drawing another one of his elaborate superhero battles. On impulse, Daniel pulled up his messages and typed, "Hope you're having a great day, buddy. I miss you." His thumb hovered over the send button. Lucas wouldn't see it until after school. The kid didn't have his own phone yet, despite constant pleading. This would go to the school's parent portal, which Mrs. Patterson monitored for emergencies. But sometimes Daniel just needed to say it, needed to put the feeling into words, even if Lucas wouldn't read them for hours. He hit send. The message disappeared from his screen with a soft whoosh. Daniel set down his phone and returned to his presentation prep, unaware that the simple 3-word message had not gone where he intended. Unaware that in the chaos of juggling multiple conversations and the distraction of pre-meeting nerves, his finger had selected the wrong contact. Unaware that "I miss you" had just been delivered to a name that should never have received such a message. Vanessa Whitmore. Daniel didn't discover the mistake immediately. He was too focused on preparing for the meeting, too absorbed in making sure every detail of his presentation was perfect. He gathered his materials, grabbed a fresh notepad, and headed toward Conference Room B at 8:55, joining the stream of colleagues making their way to the same destination. The conference room was larger than necessary for the 12 people who filed in, with a long oak table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Daniel took a seat in the middle, not too close to the head of the table where department head Richard Morrison would sit, but not so far back that he looked like he was hiding. People settled in with the usual pre-meeting small talk. Coffee was poured, laptops were opened. Someone made a joke about the weather. Jennifer complained about the subway delays. Then the energy in the room shifted. Vanessa Whitmore entered with the kind of presence that made everyone unconsciously sit up straighter. She was younger than most of the people in the room, but age was irrelevant in the face of her authority. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent, with dark hair pulled back in a style that was both professional and somehow intimidating. But it was her eyes that caught people. Sharp, analytical, the kind of eyes that saw through bullshit and excuses and found the truth underneath. "Good morning." Her voice was cool, controlled. "Don't let me interrupt. I'm merely observing today's operations." She took a seat at the far end of the table, and Richard Morrison launched into the meeting with perhaps a bit more enthusiasm than usual. They went through the agenda: portfolio updates, market analysis, client concerns, upcoming initiatives. Daniel tried to focus, but he was acutely aware of Whitmore's presence. Every time someone presented, he could see her taking notes in a leather-bound journal. Her expression never changed, never gave any indication of approval or disappointment. Finally, it was his turn. "Daniel Carter will present his analysis of the Henderson portfolio," Morrison announced. "Daniel's been handling this account for the past 4 months. and has some recommendations for restructuring. Daniel stood, moving to the front of the room where he could connect his laptop to the projector. His hands were steady. Years of presentations had trained away the visible nervousness, but his heart rate was elevated. Good morning. The Henderson portfolio currently stands at $3.2 million, diversified across technology, healthcare, and emerging markets. He clicked to his first slide. However, analysis of the past quarter's performance reveals several areas of concern. He fell into the rhythm of it, the familiar cadence of data and analysis. He presented the problems clearly, offered solutions with supporting evidence, and outlined expected outcomes with realistic timelines. Around the table, his colleagues nodded. Morrison looked pleased, and Vanessa Whitmore watched with those penetrating eyes, her pen moving occasionally across her journal. 20 minutes later, Daniel concluded. In summary, restructuring the technology allocation while maintaining our healthcare positions and selectively reducing emerging market exposure should result in a 7 to 12% improvement in annual returns while reducing volatility by approximately 15%. I'm happy to answer any questions. Morrison spoke first. Excellent work, Daniel. Very thorough. Patricia asked about specific timeline concerns. Michael questioned one of the technology picks. Daniel answered each inquiry confidently, backed by data he'd memorized. Then Whitmore's voice cut through the room. The emerging markets reduction. Everyone turned toward her. Yes? Daniel managed, his throat suddenly dry. You're recommending a 40% reduction in that sector. That's aggressive. She didn't look up from her notes. What's your confidence level on that recommendation? This was it. The moment where he either proved himself or failed spectacularly. High confidence, Daniel said. The volatility in emerging markets has increased 23% over the past 6 months, and 3 of our current positions are in sectors showing signs of regulatory pressure from their respective governments. We're not eliminating the positions entirely, which would lock in current losses, but reducing exposure limits our downside risk while maintaining the possibility of recovery. And if those markets stabilize sooner than your models predict, then we've missed some potential upside. But our primary obligation is protecting the client's capital. The Henderson portfolio is retirement-focused. They can't afford significant losses at this stage of their financial planning. Daniel met her eyes directly. I'd rather explain why we were cautiously optimistic than why we gambled with their future. The room held its breath. Whitmore's pen stopped moving. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded once. Prudent reasoning. She returned to her notes, and the meeting continued. But Daniel felt the weight lift from his chest. He'd survived Vanessa Whitmore's scrutiny. The meeting concluded at 10:30. People filed out, Daniel gathering his materials with relief flooding through him. He'd done well. His presentation had been solid. Even Whitmore had seemed satisfied. He was almost to the door when Morrison caught his arm. Good work in there, Carter. Really impressive. Thank you, sir. Whitmore rarely comments during departmental meetings. The fact that she engaged with your analysis, Morrison nodded approvingly. Keep this up and you're looking at a strong performance review next month. Daniel returned to his desk, feeling better than he had in weeks. The morning's success energized him, and he dove into his other projects with renewed focus. He worked through lunch, subsisting on vending machine coffee and the granola bar he'd stashed in his desk drawer. It was 2:17 p.m. when everything changed. Daniel was deep in a spreadsheet, analyzing quarterly trends, when he became aware of a shift in the office atmosphere. The usual hum of conversation had dropped to whispers, keyboards had stopped clicking, even the phones seemed to have gone quiet. He looked up to find every eye in the area staring past him toward the elevators. Vanessa Whitmore was walking across the 15th floor. This wasn't unusual in itself. Executives occasionally ventured down from the 16th floor. But Whitmore almost never did. In Daniel's 6 years, he'd maybe seen her on this floor 3 times, always striding purposefully to Morrison's office for private meetings. But she wasn't going to Morrison's office. She was walking toward the desk clusters, toward his section. Daniel's heart began to hammer against his ribs. Around him, people were frozen, watching. Patricia's mouth had actually fallen open. Brandon had stopped mid-sentence in whatever he'd been saying. Whitmore's heels clicked against the floor with measured precision. She didn't look left or right, didn't acknowledge the stares. Her expression was completely neutral, completely professional. and she stopped directly beside Daniel's desk. The entire floor seemed to hold its breath. "Mr. Carter?" Her voice was low, controlled, but there was something underneath it that Daniel couldn't identify. "I need a moment of your time." Daniel's mind raced. Had he made an error in his presentation? Had he somehow offended her during the meeting? Was this about his performance review? "Of course, Ms. Whitmore, I can come to your office." "That won't be necessary." She leaned down, and suddenly her face was close to his, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something expensive and subtle, close enough to see the exact shade of gray in her eyes. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but in the absolute silence of the office, the words carried. "Say it again." Daniel's brain short-circuited. I'm sorry?" "The message you sent me." Her eyes locked onto his, unblinking. "Say it again. I want to hear you say it to my face." Ice flooded Daniel's veins. "Message? What message?" He hadn't sent her any. Oh God, no. With dawning horror, Daniel's hand moved to his phone. He unlocked it with shaking fingers, pulled up his messages, and there it was, right there in his recent conversations, second from the top. Vanessa Whitmore. "I miss you." Sent at 8:47 a.m. The world tilted. Daniel's vision actually blurred at the edges. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. He'd meant to text Lucas. He always texted Lucas. How had he? When had he? "I'm waiting, Mr. Carter." The words came out in a rush, tripping over themselves. "Ms. Whitmore, I'm so incredibly sorry. That message wasn't meant for you. It was supposed to go to my son. I was texting during meeting prep and I must have selected the wrong contact and I didn't realize your son." Her voice was flat, giving nothing away. "Yes, Lucas, he's 8. I text him during the day sometimes just to let him know I'm thinking about him." Daniel knew he was babbling but couldn't stop. "I would never presume to send you a personal message. This was a complete accident, a terrible, horrible accident. I am so sorry." The silence stretched out. Around them, Daniel could feel dozens of eyes watching, ears straining to hear. This was tomorrow's gossip, next week's cautionary tale. The guy who accidentally texted, "I miss you," to the CEO. The guy who was about to be fired. Vanessa Whitmore straightened, her expression still unreadable. She looked at him for what felt like an eternity, and Daniel found himself unable to look away, trapped in that penetrating gaze. "I see," she said finally. That was it. 2 words. No indication of whether she believed him, whether she was angry, whether security was already being called. Then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking across the floor with the same measured precision. She didn't look back, didn't say anything didn't say anything else, just walked to the elevators, stepped inside, and disappeared. The moment the elevator doors closed, the office exploded into whispers. Daniel sat frozen at his desk, phone still in his hand, staring at the message that had just detonated his career. "Dude!" Brandon's voice broke through the fog. What the hell was that about? Daniel couldn't answer, couldn't think, couldn't process what had just happened. Patricia leaned across her desk, her voice gentle. "Daniel? Are you okay?" "I texted her by mistake," he heard himself say. "I meant to text Lucas. I told him I miss him, but it went to her instead. And she came all the way down here to confront you about it?" Jennifer had joined the growing circle around his desk. "That's intense. That's insane is what that is," Michael said. "I mean, who does that? Just walk up to someone in front of the whole office and everyone back to work." Morrison's voice cut through the chatter. He stood in his office doorway, expression stern. "This isn't a social hour. We have deadlines." The crowd dispersed reluctantly, but the whispers continued. Daniel could hear them even as people pretended to return to their tasks. "Did you see her face? I've never seen Whitmore on this floor. Why would she care about a random text message? Maybe there's more to it. Maybe Carter's in serious trouble." Daniel tried to focus on his work, but the words and numbers on his screen blurred together meaninglessly. His hands were still shaking. His heart hadn't slowed down. Every few minutes, someone would glance his way, and the whispers would start again. At 3 o'clock, he packed up his things. He had to leave early on Tuesdays to pick up Lucas. It was in his work agreement. Approved time off to handle school pickup since there was no one else to do it. Usually he felt guilty about leaving before everyone else. Today he just wanted to escape. He grabbed his jacket and briefcase, keeping his eyes down as he walked to the elevators. He could feel the stairs following him, could hear the whispers starting up again in his wake. The elevator ride down felt like descending into hell. Outside, the March afternoon was cold and gray. Daniel walked the 6 blocks to the subway station in a daze, his mind replaying the scene over and over. Whitmore's face close to his, her voice, "Say it again." The way everyone had stared. He'd worked so hard to maintain his reputation at the firm. 6 years of being professional, reliable, competent. 6 years of proving he could handle the job despite being a single father, despite sometimes having to leave early for Lucas, despite not having the Ivy League pedigree or family connections. And he destroyed it all with 3 words sent to the wrong person. The subway ride was a blur. The walk to Lucas's school was automatic, muscle memory carrying him while his mind spiraled. What if she fired him? What would he tell Lucas? How would they survive? His savings would cover maybe 2 months of rent and expenses. He'd have to find another job, but with a termination on his record from a prestigious firm like Carter and Associates. "Dad!" Lucas's voice cut through the panic. Daniel looked up to find his son running toward him, backpack bouncing, face lit up with excitement. "Dad, you won't believe what happened in art class. Mrs. Patterson said my drawing was so good she wants to put it in the hallway display. And Tyler said it was the best superhero he'd ever seen, and I used the new markers and they worked perfectly, and..." Daniel pulled Lucas into a tight hug, holding on perhaps a bit longer than usual. "Dad? You're squishing me. Sorry, buddy, just really happy to see you." They walked home hand in hand, Lucas chattering about his day while Daniel tried to be present, tried to focus on his son instead of the disaster waiting for him at work tomorrow. And the day after. And the day after that. At home, Lucas spread his artwork across the kitchen table. An elaborate battle scene with heroes and villains and explosions rendered in vibrant marker colors. It was actually quite good, Daniel had to admit. His son had inherited his mother's artistic talent, that was for sure. "What do you think?" Lucas looked up at him hopefully. "I think it's amazing. I think you're amazing." Daniel ruffled his hair. "I'm proud of you, buddy. Even though the proportions are a little off on Iron Man's armor? Even though. Proportions can be learned. Imagination is what matters." They made dinner together, spaghetti with jarred sauce, Lucas's favorite. They ate while Lucas continued to narrate his day, and Daniel made all the right responses, asked all the right questions, even though part of his brain was still stuck in that moment with Whitmore leaning close, demanding he say those words again. After dinner, Lucas had homework, math worksheet, and spelling practice. Daniel sat with him at the kitchen table, helping when needed, mostly just providing company. This was their routine. This was their life. Normal and stable and predictable. How could he lose this? How could he risk their stability over a stupid texting mistake? At 8:30, Lucas brushed his teeth and changed into his pajamas. Daniel tucked him into bed, pulling the covers up tight the way Lucas liked. "Dad? Yeah, buddy? Are you okay? You seem sad." 8 years old and already so perceptive. Daniel managed a smile. "I'm okay, just tired. Long day at work." "Did something bad happen?" "Nothing for you to worry about. Everything's fine." Lucas studied his face with those 2 knowing eyes. "Promise?" "Promise." The lie tasted bitter, but what else could he say? "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's Wednesday, which means..." "Library day!" Lucas's face brightened. "Can I check out the next book in the Dragon series?" "If they have it. Now sleep." "Love you, Dad. Love you more. Love you most. Love you infinity." It was their nightly ritual, this exchange of escalating affection. Daniel kissed his son's forehead and turned out the light, leaving the door cracked open the way Lucas preferred. In the living room, Daniel collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion finally catching up with him. He pulled out his phone, staring at the message thread with Vanessa Whitmore. Just one message. 3 words. "I miss you." It sat there on his screen, mocking him. He should probably text an apology, a formal professional apology explaining the mistake and expressing his regret. But what if that made things worse? What if she saw it as him bothering her further? Daniel set down the phone and pressed his palms against his eyes. Tomorrow he'd go in early, send a carefully worded email to her assistant or to Morrison, formally apologizing for the inappropriate message. He'd make it clear it was an accident. He'd grovel if necessary. He'd save his job somehow. He had to. Because losing his job meant losing stability, and losing stability meant failing Lucas, and that was simply not an option. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Daniel lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, playing out scenarios. Best case, Whitmore accepted his apology and they never spoke of it again. Worst case, termination, unemployment, financial disaster. The scenarios in between were harder to predict and somehow more terrifying for their uncertainty. Finally, around 2 a.m., exhaustion won. Daniel drifted into fitful sleep, his dreams full of clicking heels and penetrating gray eyes and the words, "Say it again," echoing endlessly. He woke to his alarm at 5:47 a.m., gritty-eyed and tense. Lucas appeared at his door, right on schedule, and they went through their morning routine. Breakfast, backpacks, the walk to school. Lucas chattering about the library books he hoped to find. Daniel providing the appropriate responses while his stomach churned with dread. At the schoolyard, he held Lucas perhaps a bit tighter than usual. "Dad, you're doing the squishing thing again." "Right, sorry." Daniel released him. "Have a great day, buddy." "You too. Don't work too hard." If only that were the problem. The commute downtown felt like walking to an execution. Every minute brought Daniel closer to whatever consequences awaited him. He'd composed and deleted 3 different apology emails on his phone during the subway ride, unable to find words that struck the right balance between professional and genuinely remorseful. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt eternal. When the doors opened, Daniel braced himself for stares and whispers, and he got them. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as he walked to his desk. Eyes followed him. Someone actually turned away when he looked in their direction. Patricia offered a sympathetic smile. "Morning, Daniel." "Morning. How are you holding up?" "Fine, completely fine." The lie was unconvincing even to his own ears. Brandon, of course, couldn't resist. "So, Carter, how's your relationship with upper management these days?" "There is no relationship. It was a mistake." "Right, a mistake." Brandon's tone suggested he believed otherwise. "Must have been some mistake for Whitmore herself to come down here about it. It was literally just a text meant for my son." "Sure it was." Brandon smirked. "Hey, no judgment. Shoot your shot, right? Though maybe aim a little lower than the CEO next time." Daniel's hands clenched into fists under his desk. "It was an accident." "Whatever you say, man." Brandon returned to his computer, but the damage was done. Daniel could hear the whispers spreading, could see people pulling up their message apps, undoubtedly texting others about what Brandon had just implied. By lunchtime, the rumors had evolved. Daniel heard fragments as he walked to the break room. Dating the CEO. Secret relationship. That's why his performance reviews are always so good. Nepotism. Wonder how long it's been going on. Each whisper felt like a knife. Daniel wanted to scream, to shake people and make them understand that none of it was true. But he knew that would only make things worse. Protests would be seen as defensiveness. Defensiveness would be seen as confirmation. He grabbed coffee and returned to his desk, putting on his headphones despite not playing any music, just creating a barrier between himself and the gossip. The afternoon crawled past. Daniel tried to work, but productivity was impossible when every glance in his direction restarted the whisper cycle. Morrison called him into his office at 2 o'clock and Daniel's heart nearly stopped. This was it. Termination. But Morrison just wanted to discuss the Henderson portfolio implementation timeline. No mention of yesterday's incident. No knowing looks or awkward questions, just normal work discussion. Daniel left the meeting confused. If Morrison didn't know about the rumors, that meant they hadn't reached management yet. But they would. Gossip always spread upward eventually. At 3 o'clock, Daniel packed up to get Lucas. The whispers followed him to the elevator. The rest of the week followed the same pattern. Stares, whispers, Brandon's snide comments. Daniel working twice as hard to prove his competence had nothing to do with imaginary connections to Whitmore. Lucas noticing his father's distraction but not understanding the cause. By Friday, Daniel was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with work hours. He picked up Lucas from school, and they walked home through a city preparing for the weekend. Pizza for dinner, Friday tradition. Movie night, another tradition. Lucas chose a superhero film they'd both seen 3 times already, but Daniel didn't mind the familiarity. Halfway through the movie, Lucas fell asleep against his side. Daniel sat there in the flickering light, his son's weight warm and solid against him, and felt the week's stress finally crack. One mistake, one stupid, terrible mistake, and his whole carefully constructed life was falling apart. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't. Whatever it took, however he had to prove himself, Daniel would protect what mattered most. This life, this moment, his son sleeping peacefully, unaware of the storms in his father's world. The movie played on. Outside, the city hummed with Friday night energy, and Daniel sat in the darkness, his arm around Lucas, and made himself a promise. He would survive this. He would fix this. He had to. Because giving up wasn't an option when you were someone's whole world. The weekend passed too quickly, as weekends always did. Saturday morning brought pancakes and cartoons, Lucas's laughter filling the apartment and momentarily pushing away the weight of Daniel's workplace worries. They went to the park in the afternoon, Lucas racing ahead to the playground while Daniel sat on a bench, watching his son climb and swing and play with the fearless energy of childhood. A text from Patricia came through around 2 p.m. Don't let the gossip get to you. People will find something else to talk about soon enough. Daniel appreciated the sentiment, even if he didn't quite believe it. In his experience, office rumors had the lifespan of cockroaches, nearly impossible to kill and always multiplying when you weren't looking. Sunday brought homework and laundry, the mundane tasks of single parenthood that Daniel had long ago learned to juggle. Lucas worked on a book report while Daniel folded clothes, and for a few hours everything felt normal again. Safe. Predictable. But Sunday night brought the familiar dread of Monday morning, amplified now by the uncertainty waiting for him at the office. Lucas noticed, of course. At bedtime, he looked up at his father with concerned eyes. Dad, is work making you sad? Work's just busy, buddy. Nothing for you to worry about. You keep saying that, but you have that line. Lucas reached up and touched the space between Daniel's eyebrows. Right there. You only get that line when you're worried. Daniel caught his son's small hand and kissed it. I promise you, everything's going to be okay. Your old man's tougher than he looks. You're not that old. Tell that to my back when I try to pick you up. Lucas giggled, and Daniel tucked him in with the usual ritual of escalating affection. But after the lights were out and his son was asleep, Daniel sat in the living room, staring at his phone, that message thread with Vanessa Whitmore still there like evidence of a crime he couldn't erase. He should delete it, archive it, pretend it never happened. But he couldn't make himself do it. Some part of him needed the reminder of how quickly everything could fall apart, how one moment of carelessness could threaten everything he'd built. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. Daniel dropped Lucas at school, endured the commute, and stepped off the elevator onto the 15th floor at 8:43 a.m., bracing himself for another week of whispers and stares. What he wasn't prepared for was the intensity of it. The gossip had apparently spent the weekend growing, multiplying, evolving into something more elaborate than the simple truth. Daniel heard fragments as he walked to his desk. Saw them together at a restaurant uptown. Explains how he got promoted so fast. She's definitely playing favorites. Wonder if Morrison knows. Daniel's jaw clenched. None of it was true. He'd never been to a restaurant with Whitmore. He'd earned his promotions through hard work. There were no favorites being played. But truth seemed irrelevant in the face of a good story. Brandon was holding court near the coffee station, surrounded by a small audience. I'm just saying, it's interesting timing. Carter joins the firm, Whitmore takes over as CEO a year later, and suddenly he's getting the high-profile accounts? You don't find that suspicious? That's not how it happened, Daniel said, his voice cutting across the space. I got those accounts because I worked my ass off for them. Brandon turned, his expression a mixture of fake surprise and genuine smugness. Hey, Carter, didn't see you there. We were just discussing. I know what you were discussing, and it's fiction. Daniel moved closer, keeping his voice level despite the anger burning in his chest. I've never had anything but a professional relationship with Ms. Whitmore. The text message was an accident. That's the truth, whether you choose to believe it or not. Whoa, defensive much? Brandon held up his hands in mock surrender. I'm just making conversation. If there's nothing to hide, why are you so worked up? Because you're spreading lies that could damage my reputation and my career. I'm not spreading anything. I'm just observing patterns. If other people draw conclusions, that's on them. It was a perfect trap, and Brandon knew it. Deny too strongly and it looked like guilt. Don't deny enough and the silence became confirmation. Daniel was saved from having to respond by Patricia's voice from across the room. Brandon, Morrison wants to see you about the Feldman account. Something about missing documentation? Brandon's smug expression faltered slightly. I submitted everything on Friday. Well, he seems to think otherwise. Better go clear it up. As Brandon walked away, Patricia caught Daniel's eye and gave him a small nod. The missing documentation was probably real. Brandon was notorious for sloppy paperwork, but the timing was convenient enough that Daniel suspected Patricia had mentioned it to Morrison specifically to interrupt the conversation. Thanks, he murmured as he passed her desk. Don't thank me. Just keep your head down and let this blow over. But it didn't blow over. If anything, the gossip intensified as the week progressed. By Tuesday afternoon, Daniel had heard at least 5 different versions of his supposed relationship with Vanessa Whitmore, each more elaborate than the last. In one version, they'd been secretly dating for years. In another, she'd specifically hired him because of some previous connection. The most outlandish claimed he was actually the father of a secret child she'd hidden from public view. That last one would have been funny if it wasn't so damaging. Daniel tried to focus on his work, producing analysis and reports at a furious pace. If people wanted to question how he'd earned his position, he'd bury them in evidence of his competence. The Henderson portfolio implementation was proceeding ahead of schedule. His quarterly reports were spotless. Every single piece of work that left his desk was triple-checked and perfect. But perfection couldn't stop whispers. Wednesday brought a new development. Daniel was working through lunch. He'd started eating at his desk to avoid the break room gossip, when his email pinged with a message from an address he didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Thought you should see this." His stomach dropped before he even opened it. Inside was a screenshot of an internal message board thread titled, "Office Romance or Professional Misconduct?" The thread had over 60 comments, many of them speculating about Daniel and Whitmore. Some were merely curious. Others were viciously judgmental. A few suggested he should be investigated for ethics violations. Daniel closed the email and pushed back from his desk, his hands shaking. This had gone beyond office gossip. This was organized character assassination. You okay? Patricia's voice was gentle. Someone sent me screenshots of the message board. Don't read that garbage. It's just people with too much time and too little supervision. They're talking about ethics investigations, Patricia. What if HR gets involved? What if this actually becomes an official thing? Based on what? A single accidental text message? Daniel, you've done nothing wrong. You violated no policies. This is just noise. But noise could be deafening when it was loud enough. That evening, Daniel picked up Lucas in a fog of anxiety. His son chattered about science class. They'd made volcanoes with baking soda and vinegar, but Daniel could barely focus on the words. His mind kept circling back to those message board comments, the casual cruelty of people he'd worked alongside for years. At home, while Lucas did homework, Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. You should be ashamed of yourself, sleeping your way to success while the rest of us actually work. He stared at the message, ice flooding his veins. Someone had gotten his personal cell number. Someone had taken the time to look it up and send him this. Another message came through. Does your son know what kind of man his father is? Daniel's vision actually blurred. His hands clenched around the phone hard enough to make the case creak. How dare they bring Lucas into this? How dare they? Dad? Lucas's voice cut through the rage. Can you help me with number 7? Daniel took a breath, then another, forcing his face into something approximating calm. Sure, buddy. Let me see. He helped Lucas with his math homework, explained the concept of long division for the 3rd time, praised his son's effort when he finally got it right. All the while his phone sat on the counter. those messages burning like acid in his peripheral vision. After Lucas was in bed, Daniel sat in the darkened living room and read the texts again. He should block the number, report it to HR maybe. But what good would that do? The damage was already done, and making a formal complaint would only draw more attention to the situation. Instead, he deleted the messages and blocked the number, feeling like he was putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. Thursday morning brought rain, the sky gray and oppressive as Daniel made his way to the office. He was soaked by the time he reached the building, his umbrella having failed spectacularly in the wind. He rode the elevator up to 15, water dripping from his coat, and stepped out into a scene that made him freeze. Every single person in the immediate area was staring at their computer screens with identical expressions of shock. The usual morning sounds, conversation, keyboard clicks, ringing phones, were absent. The silence was absolute and terrifying. "What happened?" Daniel asked, but no one answered. He made his way to his desk, dread building with each step. Patricia looked up at him, her face pale. "Daniel, don't..." But it was too late. He'd already seen his computer screen where someone had left open a document. Not just any document, a mock-up of what appeared to be an internal investigation report, complete with official-looking headers and a list of allegations against him. Inappropriate relationship with superior, possible ethics violations, professional misconduct, favoritism, conflict of interest. None of it was real. The formatting was slightly off, the language too informal. This was someone's idea of a joke. A cruel, elaborate joke designed to humiliate him. But seeing it there, on his screen, where anyone walking by could read it. "Who did this?" Daniel's voice came out rough, barely controlled. Silence. Everyone studiously looking at their own screens now, pretending they hadn't been watching moments before. "I asked a question. Who did this?" "Carter." Morrison's voice cut across the tension. He stood in his office doorway, expression grave. "My office. Now." The walk across the floor felt like a death march. Daniel was acutely aware of every eye on him, every whispered comment. He stepped into Morrison's office, and the door closed behind him with a sound like a cell door slamming. Morrison moved behind his desk but didn't sit. "I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Is there any truth to the rumors about you and Ms. Whitmore?" "No, sir, absolutely none." The text message was meant for my son. I was texting him during meeting prep last week and accidentally selected the wrong contact. It was a careless mistake, but it was just a mistake. Morrison studied him for a long moment. "I believe you. Your work has always been exemplary, and nothing in your history here suggests any kind of impropriety. But Daniel, this situation has gotten out of hand. The gossip is affecting team morale and productivity. I need you to understand the position this puts me in." Daniel's heart sank. "Are you letting me go?" "No. But I'm going to recommend that HR conduct a brief informal review, just to clear the air officially. It'll be a formality, a few questions, verification that all policies were followed. Once it's done, we can put this whole mess behind us." An HR review. Daniel felt the floor tilting beneath him. "Sir, with all due respect, that's going to make people think there was actually something to investigate. Or it will make people see that there wasn't, and this was all just malicious gossip." Morrison's voice was firm, but not unkind. "I'm trying to protect you here, Daniel. If we don't address this formally, it'll just keep growing. This way we investigate, find nothing, and everyone moves on." It was logical, it made sense, and it felt like a trap anyway. What about the person who created that fake report? Or whoever's been spreading the rumors? "I'm handling that separately, but I need your cooperation on this. Will you work with HR?" What choice did he have? "Yes, sir." "Good. They'll reach out to schedule a meeting. In the meantime, keep doing what you do best. Excellent work. Let your performance speak for itself." Daniel left Morrison's office feeling like he'd just agreed to his own execution. An HR investigation, even an informal one, would go in his file. Future employers might see it. It would follow him. He returned to his desk to find someone had closed the fake document, but the damage was done. Everyone knew. Everyone had seen. Brandon wasn't even trying to hide his satisfaction. "HR investigation, huh? That's rough, man." Daniel didn't respond. He sat down, opened his legitimate work, and tried to focus on the numbers that had always made sense when nothing else did. The rest of the day was torture. People avoided him like he was contagious. The break room went silent when he entered. Even Patricia seemed uncertain how to act around him, her usual warmth replaced by careful professionalism. At 2:45, Daniel's phone buzzed with an email from HR. Please schedule a meeting for tomorrow at 10 a.m. to discuss recent workplace concerns. Tomorrow. They weren't wasting any time. Daniel picked up Lucas at 3:15 and his son immediately noticed something was wrong. Bad day? Yeah, buddy. Pretty bad day. Want to talk about it? Daniel managed a weak smile. I appreciate the offer, but this is grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. You always say that, but I can see you're sad. I don't like when you're sad. They walked home hand in hand, Lucas trying to cheer him up with stories about his day, his teacher's funny jokes, the game he'd played at recess. Daniel made the appropriate responses, but his mind was already on tomorrow's HR meeting, running through potential questions and answers, trying to prepare for something he had no idea how to handle. That evening, after Lucas was asleep, Daniel sat down and wrote out a timeline of everything that had happened. The accidental text, Whitmore's confrontation, the spread of rumors, the anonymous messages, the fake report. He documented everything he could remember, dates and times and witnesses, building a case for his own defense. It felt pathetic, preparing for an investigation into something that had never happened. But it was all he could do. Friday morning arrived too soon. Daniel got Lucas to school, then headed downtown with a sense of impending doom. The HR meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., which meant he had an hour and 15 minutes to sit at his desk and feel his colleagues' stares. Brandon made a show of wishing him good luck. Try not to incriminate yourself. HR is pretty good at getting people to say things they shouldn't. There's nothing to incriminate. I didn't do anything wrong. Sure, man. Whatever you say. At 9:55, Daniel made his way to the HR department on the 14th floor. The waiting area was sterile and uncomfortable, with motivational posters on the walls that felt deeply ironic given the circumstances. He sat in a chair that squeaked every time he shifted his weight and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. At 10:03, a woman in her 50s appeared. Mr. Carter, I'm Janet Wilcox, Senior HR Director. Please, come with me. Her office was small but professional, with a desk, 2 chairs, and a window overlooking an air shaft. Janet gestured for Daniel to sit, then took her place across from him with a file folder that looked ominously thick. Thank you for meeting with me on short notice, she began, her tone neutral and professional. I want to start by clarifying that this is an informal review, not a formal investigation. We're simply gathering information to address some concerns that have been raised. Concerns about a text message I accidentally sent. Among other things. I've been made aware that there are rumors circulating about your relationship with Ms. Whitmore. Can you explain the nature of your professional interaction with her? Daniel had prepared for this. I've worked at this firm for 6 years. In that time, I've been in the same room as Miss Whitmore maybe 10 times, mostly during company-wide meetings or the occasional departmental observation. Prior to last week, I'd never had a one-on-one conversation with her. My work has never involved direct reporting to her office. We have no relationship beyond that of any employee to the CEO of their company. Janet made notes. And the text message was meant for my son, Lucas. He's 8 years old. I text him during the workday sometimes, just brief messages to let him know I'm thinking about him. Last Tuesday, I was preparing for a morning meeting and sent him a message. I miss you. But in my distraction, I selected the wrong contact. It went to Ms. Whitmore instead. How did you discover the error? When she came to my desk later that day and asked me to explain it. And what was her reaction when you did? Daniel paused. She accepted my explanation and left. That was the extent of our interaction. Did she seem angry, upset? Her expression was neutral. I honestly couldn't tell what she was thinking. More notes. Have you had any contact with Ms. Whitmore since that incident? No, ma'am. None whatsoever. Have you received any preferential treatment that you're aware of? Special assignments, faster promotions, anything that might suggest favoritism? No. Every assignment I've received has been based on my performance and experience. My promotions have been in line with company standards and were all approved by my direct supervisor, Richard Morrison, not by Ms. Whitmore. The questions continued for another 20 minutes. Janet was thorough, professional, and gave absolutely no indication of what she was thinking. She asked about his work history, his performance reviews, his relationship with colleagues. She asked if anyone had pressured him to claim a relationship with Whitmore that didn't exist, or if anyone had threatened him to keep quiet about one that did. Finally, she closed her folder. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Carter. I'll be conducting a few more interviews with relevant parties, and then I'll compile my findings. You should have a resolution within the next week. And in the meantime? In the meantime, continue doing your job. Try to ignore the gossip. I know that's easier said than done, but engaging with it will only make things worse. Daniel stood to leave, then hesitated. Ms. Wilcox, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you believe me? She looked at him for a long moment, her expression softening slightly. Mr. Carter, in my 20 years of HR work, I've seen actual cases of inappropriate workplace relationships. I've seen the patterns, the behaviors, the evidence. What I'm seeing here is a good employee who made a careless mistake and is being crucified for it by people who should know better. She stood, extending her hand. Yes, I believe you. Now go back to work and let me handle this. The handshake was firm, professional, and somehow reassuring. Daniel left her office feeling marginally better, though he knew the hard part was still ahead, waiting for the resolution while the rumors continued to swirl. When he returned to the 15th floor, Brandon was waiting. So? How'd it go? Did you confess everything? There was nothing to confess. It was a mistake, Brandon, just a mistake. Right, and Whitmore personally came down here because she wanted an explanation for a weird message she received from an employee, which I gave her. End of story. If you say so. Brandon's smirk never wavered. Must be nice having the CEO so interested in you, though. Some of us have to actually work for recognition. Something in Daniel snapped. He stepped closer to Brandon, keeping his voice low but intense. You know what's interesting? You've been at this firm for 8 months. In that time, I've watched you take credit for other people's work, throw colleagues under the bus to make yourself look better, and now actively sabotage someone's reputation with lies. So maybe instead of being jealous of imaginary favoritism, you should focus on actually earning the recognition you're so desperate for. Brandon's face flushed red. You think you're better than me because you've been here longer? You think your little performance review speeches and your perfect attendance record matter? This firm runs on connections, Carter. Always has. You just got lucky finding one. I didn't find anything except a job I work my ass off at every single day. Keep telling yourself that. They stood there, locked in a staring contest that felt like it could turn physical any second. Around them, the office had gone quiet, everyone watching this confrontation. Patricia's voice cut through the tension. Daniel, Morrison needs those Henderson implementation reports. He's asking for them specifically. It was an escape route, and Daniel took it. He broke eye contact with Brandon and walked to his desk, hands shaking with suppressed anger. He'd never been a confrontational person, had always believed in professionalism and keeping his head down. But there was only so much a person could take before they had to push back. The rest of Friday crawled by. Daniel buried himself in work, producing reports and analysis with fierce concentration. If people wanted to question his competence, he'd drown them in evidence to the contrary. At 3 o'clock, he escaped to pick up Lucas. The weekend stretched ahead. 2 days of refuge from the office politics and gossip. 2 days to be just a father, not the subject of malicious rumors. Lucas had made a drawing in art class, a picture of Daniel at his desk, surrounded by papers and looking serious. That's you at work, his son explained proudly. Mrs. Patterson said I captured your concentrated expression. Daniel studied the drawing, seeing himself through his son's eyes. Serious, focused, working hard, not scandalous, not inappropriate, just a father doing his job. It's perfect, buddy. Can I keep it? It's for you. I made it because you've been so worried about work. I thought maybe it would help to see that I see you working hard. 8 years old and already more emotionally intelligent than most adults. Daniel pulled Lucas into a tight hug right there on the sidewalk. Thank you. This is the best thing anyone's given me all week. They spent the weekend in their usual routine, but Daniel found himself more present than he'd been in days. Park time on Saturday, where Lucas made friends with another kid and they played some elaborate superhero game. Pizza and movies on Saturday night. Sunday morning pancakes and afternoon homework help. It was normal. It was good. It was everything that mattered. And Monday morning, Daniel would return to the office and face whatever consequences awaited him. But for now, he had this. His son, his small apartment, the simple rhythms of their life together. That was enough to keep fighting for. Sunday evening, after Lucas was in bed, Daniel's phone buzzed with an email. His heart rate spiked when he saw it was from the executive office. But it wasn't a termination notice. It was a company-wide announcement about a mandatory staff meeting scheduled for Tuesday at 2 p.m. All employees required to attend. No exceptions. Daniel stared at the message, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. Company-wide mandatory meetings were rare, usually reserved for major announcements. Restructuring, policy changes, significant incidents that required addressing. This was about him. It had to be. The rumors had reached a level that required executive intervention, and tomorrow Daniel would stand in front of the entire company while they addressed the scandal he'd accidentally created. He set down his phone and pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to breathe through the anxiety. Whatever happened tomorrow, he'd face it. He had to. Because the alternative, giving up, walking away, letting the gossip win, wasn't an option when you had a son depending on you. The clock ticked toward midnight, and Daniel sat alone in the darkness, preparing himself for whatever Tuesday would bring. Monday morning arrived with the kind of oppressive gray sky that matched Daniel's mood perfectly. He went through the motions of his routine on autopilot, making breakfast, packing Lucas's lunch, walking to school through streets still slick from overnight rain. His son chattered about an upcoming spelling test, oblivious to the storm gathering in his father's professional life. At the school gates, Lucas paused before running off to join his friends. "Dad, you have that line again." Daniel forced his face to relax. "Just thinking about work stuff, buddy. Nothing important." "If it makes you worried, it's important." Lucas's expression was far too serious for an 8-year-old. "That's what you always tell me about my feelings." Caught by his own parenting advice, Daniel managed a genuine smile. "You're right. It is important. But I promise you, I can handle it. Your old man's tougher than he looks, remember?" "I remember. Love you, Dad. Love you more. Love you most. Love you infinity." Lucas grinned and took off toward the playground, and Daniel stood watching until his son disappeared into the crowd of children. Then he turned toward the subway station, that familiar dread settling heavy in his chest. The office was unusually quiet when Daniel arrived at 8:47. People were at their desks, but the normal morning energy was subdued, replaced by an undercurrent of nervous anticipation. Everyone knew about tomorrow's mandatory meeting. Everyone was speculating about what it meant. And most of them, Daniel suspected, had concluded it was about him. He settled at his desk and tried to work, but concentration was impossible. Every time someone walked past, he tensed. Every email notification made his heart rate spike. The morning crawled by with excruciating slowness, each minute feeling like an hour. Patricia appeared at his desk around 10:30, setting down a coffee cup. "You look like you need this more than I do." "Thanks." Daniel wrapped his hands around the warmth. "I'm assuming you've heard the theories about tomorrow's meeting." "I've heard about 6 different theories, ranging from mildly plausible to completely insane." She lowered her voice. "Daniel, whatever happens tomorrow, you need to remember that you haven't done anything wrong. You've been a model employee for 6 years. One accident doesn't erase that." Tell that to the message boards. The message boards are full of people who peaked in high school and never got over it. Their opinions don't matter. They matter if they affect my career. Patricia's expression softened with sympathy. "I know this is scary, but you're not alone in this, okay? Some of us actually know what kind of person you are." The kindness in her voice nearly broke something in Daniel. He'd been holding himself together through sheer force of will, but genuine compassion threatened to crack his armor. "I appreciate that. More than you know." She squeezed his shoulder briefly and returned to her desk, leaving Daniel to stare at his computer screen and pretend to work, while his mind spun in anxious circles. Lunch was a protein bar eaten at his desk. Daniel had stopped going to the break room entirely, unable to stomach the whispers that inevitably started when he entered. He was halfway through responding to an email when Brandon's voice cut across the quiet office. "Hey, Carter, Got a second? Daniel looked up to find Brandon standing by his desk, expression unreadable. This couldn't be good. What do you want, Brandon? Just wanted to say no hard feelings about Friday, heat of the moment and all that. Brandon's tone was casual, but something in his eyes suggested otherwise. We're all under a lot of pressure here. Right, sure. Tomorrow's meeting is probably going to clear everything up anyway. Put all the rumors to rest. Brandon leaned against the desk partition. Unless, of course, there's actually something to them. Then things might get interesting. Daniel set down his pen very carefully, trying to keep his voice level. Brandon, I'm going to say this one more time, as clearly as possible. There is nothing between me and Ms. Whitmore. There never has been. The text was an accident. That's the complete truth. Okay, I believe you. Brandon held up his hands, but his smirk suggested otherwise. It's just weird, the timing of everything. The way she came down here personally. The mandatory meeting right after HR starts asking questions. If I didn't know better, I'd think someone was trying to cover something up. Well, you do know better, because I just told you the truth. Sure, man, whatever you say. Brandon pushed off from the desk. Anyway, good luck tomorrow. Hope it all works out for you. He walked away, and Daniel had to physically restrain himself from throwing something. Brandon wasn't just spreading rumors anymore. He was actively building a narrative, laying groundwork for tomorrow's meeting to be interpreted in the worst possible light. The afternoon brought an email from Janet Wilcox. Thank you for your cooperation last week. My review is complete and will be discussed at tomorrow's staff meeting. Please be prepared to answer any additional questions if necessary. Be prepared to answer questions in front of the entire company about rumors that had grown more twisted and malicious with each retelling. Daniel's hands were shaking as he typed a response acknowledging receipt of the email. This was actually happening. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., he would stand in front of hundreds of colleagues while his professional reputation was either vindicated or destroyed. At 3 o'clock, Daniel escaped to pick up Lucas, grateful for any excuse to leave the office early. The walk to Riverside Elementary gave him time to breathe, to remember that there was a world beyond office politics and gossip. Lucas emerged from the school building with paint stains on his shirt and a huge smile. Dad, we did finger painting today and I made a sunset. Mrs. Patterson said it showed excellent color theory, whatever that means. It means you're talented, buddy. Can I see it? Lucas carefully unrolled the painting from his backpack, a surprisingly sophisticated blend of oranges and purples and reds, layered to create depth and movement. For a moment, Daniel forgot about tomorrow's meeting, lost in genuine pride for his son's creativity. This is incredible, Lucas. We're definitely putting this on the fridge. They walked home hand in hand, Lucas describing every detail of his artistic process, while Daniel made the appropriate impressed noises. At the apartment, they had their usual after-school routine: snack, homework, playtime. For a few hours, Daniel could almost pretend everything was normal. But after Lucas was in bed, the anxiety came roaring back. Daniel sat in the darkened living room, tomorrow's mandatory meeting playing out in his mind in 100 different terrible scenarios. Would Whitmore herself be there? Would HR present their findings publicly? Would he be given a chance to defend himself, or would this be a done deal before he even walked into the conference hall? His phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow will be what it is, and worrying won't change it. Easier said than done. Daniel lay in bed until after midnight, staring at the ceiling, his mind refusing to settle. When sleep finally came, it was fitful and filled with fragments of anxious dreams, standing in front of crowds that whispered and pointed, searching for words that wouldn't come, running through endless corridors toward a meeting he could never quite reach. He woke Tuesday morning feeling like he hadn't slept at all. The routine with Lucas helped ground him. Pancakes and orange juice, backpack check, the walk to school through a morning that had turned surprisingly bright and clear, as if the weather was mocking his mood. Big day at work? Lucas asked as they approached the school. Yeah, buddy, pretty big day. Are you nervous? Daniel considered lying, then decided his son deserved honesty. A little bit, yeah. When I get nervous about tests, I remember that I studied hard and did my best. Then whatever happens, happens. Lucas looked up at him with those perceptive eyes. Maybe that works for grown-up stuff too? When did you get so wise? I learned it from you, Dad. They said their goodbyes at the school gate, and Daniel headed downtown with his son's words echoing in his mind. He'd worked hard. He'd done his best. Whatever happened now was beyond his control. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it just made him feel helpless. The office atmosphere when he arrived was electric with anticipation. Conversation stopped abruptly when Daniel walked past. People glanced at him, then quickly away. Even Patricia seemed subdued, offering only a small encouraging nod as he took his seat. The morning passed in a blur of pretending to work while internally preparing for the 2 p.m. meeting. Daniel rehearsed potential responses, imagined various scenarios, tried to steel himself for public humiliation. Around him, productivity had essentially stopped. Everyone was just killing time until the mandatory gathering. At 1:45, people began migrating toward the main conference hall on the 14th floor. The space was usually reserved for company-wide announcements and quarterly reviews. It could hold the entire staff of Carter and Associates with room to spare. Daniel joined the stream of employees, keeping his eyes forward, trying to ignore the whispers that followed him. The conference hall filled quickly, people claiming seats with the kind of strategic positioning that suggested everyone wanted a good view of whatever was about to happen. Daniel found himself near the middle, surrounded by colleagues who'd spent the past week and a half treating him like either a pariah or a source of entertainment. Brandon settled into a seat 3 rows ahead, turning to survey the crowd with barely concealed excitement. This was clearly the highlight of his month, watching someone else's potential downfall. At exactly 2 p.m., the side door opened and the executive team filed in. Richard Morrison led the way, followed by several senior vice presidents Daniel recognized only from company photos. And finally, Vanessa Whitmore herself. The room went absolutely silent. Whitmore moved to the center of the small stage at the front of the hall, her presence commanding immediate attention. She wore a navy suit that managed to be both severely professional and somehow elegant. Her dark hair pulled back in the same intimidating style Daniel remembered from their previous encounters. But it was her expression that caught everyone, completely neutral, revealing nothing. Morrison moved to the podium, clearing his throat. "Thank you all for being here on short notice. We have an important matter to address, and Ms. Whitmore has asked to speak to you directly." He stepped aside and Whitmore took his place at the podium. She surveyed the crowd with those sharp gray eyes, and Daniel felt like she could see straight through to everyone's thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was clear and controlled, carrying easily through the silent hall. "I'm going to be direct because that's the only way to handle this situation. It has come to my attention that rumors have been circulating through this office about my relationship with one of our employees, Daniel Carter." The room somehow got even quieter. Daniel felt hundreds of eyes shift toward him, felt his face burning. Whitmore continued, her tone never changing. "These rumors claim that Mr. Carter and I have some kind of inappropriate personal relationship that has influenced his professional advancement. I'm here to tell you, unequivocally, that these rumors are completely false." A ripple of reaction moved through the crowd. Surprise, disappointment, confusion. Daniel's heart was hammering so hard he could barely hear. "Mr. Carter has worked at this firm for 6 years. In that time, I have observed his performance from a distance, as I do with all employees. His advancement has been based solely on his excellent work, his dedication, and his consistent results. There is no personal relationship. There never has been." She paused, letting that sink in. "The source of these rumors appears to be a single text message that Mr. Carter accidentally sent to me last week. A message that was clearly meant for his young son. A simple mistake that any parent juggling work and family responsibilities might make." She leaned forward slightly, and her voice took on a harder edge. "What troubles me isn't the mistake. Mistakes happen. What troubles me is how quickly this office transformed a simple accident into a vicious gossip campaign designed to destroy a colleague's reputation." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. No one was whispering now. "I have worked in corporate environments my entire adult life," Whitmore said, her words cutting through the hall like a blade. "I have seen office politics. I have seen professional rivalries. But what I've witnessed over the past week and a half goes beyond normal workplace dynamics. It crosses into bullying, harassment, and potential defamation." Brandon had stopped smiling. In fact, he'd gone very pale. "Over the past several days, HR Director Janet Wilcox has conducted a thorough review of this situation at my request. She has interviewed multiple employees, reviewed message board posts, and examined anonymous communications that have been sent to Mr. Carter and others. What she found was disturbing. Whitmore nodded to Janet, who stood from her seat in the front row and moved to join her at the podium. Janet held a file folder that looked even thicker than the one from their meeting last week. "Thank you, Ms. Whitmore." Janet opened the folder, her expression grave. "During my investigation, I discovered a coordinated pattern of rumor spreading that went far beyond casual gossip. This included the creation and distribution of false documents, anonymous harassment via text message, and deliberate attempts to damage Mr. Carter's professional reputation." Daniel felt like the room was spinning. Someone had actually documented all of it. Janet had actual evidence. "While many employees participated in spreading these rumors to some degree," Janet continued, "my investigation identified one individual who was primarily responsible for initiating and escalating the gossip." She paused. "Brandon Keller." Every head in the room turned toward Brandon, who looked like he'd been slapped. "Mr. Keller," Janet's voice was steady and professional, "can you confirm that you were responsible for creating the fake HR investigation report that appeared on Mr. Carter's computer last Thursday?" Brandon's mouth opened and closed. That was just a joke. I didn't mean... Can you also confirm that you initiated multiple message board threads speculating about Mr. Carter's relationship with Ms. Whitmore? Everyone was talking about it. I was just... And can you confirm that you provided Mr. Carter's personal cell phone number to at least 3 other employees, encouraging them to send him harassing messages? The color drained completely from Brandon's face. Around him, people were leaning away, distancing themselves from the blast radius. Whitmore's voice cut through the silence. "Mr. Keller, you are terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out of the building. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings under supervision. Any company materials or data must remain here." "You can't..." Brandon started to stand, his voice rising. "This is insane. I didn't do anything that half the office wasn't doing. Everyone was talking about it." "Everyone was talking about rumors that you deliberately started and spread," Whitmore said, her tone ice cold. "There's a difference between passing along gossip and actively orchestrating a harassment campaign. You crossed that line repeatedly." 2 security guards appeared at the side door, as if they'd been waiting for this moment. Brandon looked around the room desperately, as if hoping someone would come to his defense. No one did. No one even met his eyes. "This is bullshit," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "Carter's the one who texted the CEO like some pathetic... Mr. Keller." Whitmore's voice cracked like a whip. "You have exactly 10 seconds to leave this hall quietly before I have security physically remove you. Your choice." The guards moved closer. Brandon stood there for a moment longer, his face a mask of impotent rage, then stormed toward the exit with the security team following. The door slammed behind them, and the sound echoed through the absolutely silent conference hall. Whitmore waited until the echo faded before continuing. "Let me be very clear about something. This company has 0 tolerance for workplace harassment in any form. Spreading malicious rumors about a colleague is harassment. Creating false documents to humiliate someone is harassment. Coordinating campaigns to damage someone's reputation is harassment." She let that hang in the air, her gaze sweeping across the assembled employees. Daniel saw several people sink lower in their seats. During the investigation, Ms. Wilcox identified several other employees who contributed significantly to this situation. Those individuals will be meeting with HR and their supervisors over the next week to discuss appropriate consequences. Whitmore's expression was like stone. "Make no mistake. If you participated in this rumor mill, if you passed along unfounded gossip, if you sent anonymous messages or created message board posts attacking Mr. Carter's character, there will be accountability." The tension in the room was suffocating. Daniel felt like he could barely breathe. "However," Whitmore said, and her voice softened fractionally, "I also recognize that not everyone acted with malicious intent. Some of you were simply caught up in what seemed like harmless office gossip. You didn't think about the real person being affected. You didn't consider that behind all the speculation was a man trying to do his job and raise his son." She paused, and Daniel felt her eyes find him in the crowd. For just a moment, her expression wasn't the cold professional mask. There was something almost sympathetic in it. Mr. Carter, she said, and her voice carried clearly through the hall. Would you please stand? Daniel's legs felt like water, but he forced himself to his feet. Every eye in the room turned toward him again, but the energy was different now. Instead of judgment and speculation, there was mostly embarrassment and shame. Mr. Carter has been with this firm for 6 years, Whitmore said, her words measured and deliberate. In that time, he has consistently produced excellent work. He has mentored junior analysts. He has brought in satisfied clients and maintained strong relationships. His performance reviews have been uniformly positive. His dedication to both his work and his family is evident to anyone who actually pays attention. She looked around the room again. This man did nothing wrong except make a simple, human mistake. And in response, this office turned him into a target. You whispered about him in break rooms. You speculated about his character on message boards. You made jokes at his expense. Some of you sent him threatening messages. You created an actively hostile work environment for a colleague who had done nothing to deserve it. The shame in the room was palpable now. People were staring at their hands, at the floor, anywhere but at Daniel or Whitmore. I want you all to think about that, Whitmore continued. Think about how quickly you were willing to believe the worst about someone. Think about how easily you participated in destroying another person's reputation. And then think about how you would feel if you were the one standing where Mr. Carter is standing right now. She let the silence stretch out, let the weight of her words sink in. Then she nodded to Daniel. You can sit down, Mr. Carter. Thank you. Daniel sank back into his seat, his legs actually shaking. Around him, people looked like they wanted to disappear. Whitmore returned her attention to the crowd. Going forward, I expect professional behavior from every person in this company. That means treating your colleagues with respect. That means not participating in gossip or rumor spreading. That means thinking before you speak, post, or send messages that could damage someone's career or well-being. She stepped back from the podium, and Morrison moved to take her place. Thank you, Ms. Whitmore. I want to echo everything that's been said here today. This office has always prided itself on professionalism and collaboration. What happened over the past week and a half fell far short of those standards. He looked around the room grimly. As Ms. Whitmore mentioned, there will be individual meetings with those who played significant roles in this situation. The rest of you should consider this meeting a wake-up call. We can do better, and we will do better. Meeting adjourned. People began filing out slowly, the usual post-meeting chatter completely absent. Daniel stayed in his seat, trying to process what had just happened. Whitmore had defended him, publicly, forcefully. She'd fired Brandon and threatened consequences for others. She'd made it absolutely clear that the rumors were false and that he'd done nothing wrong. Patricia appeared at his elbow. You okay? I don't know what I am. Daniel's voice came out rough. That was Vanessa Whitmore protecting her employee and making an example out of workplace bullying. Patricia squeezed his arm. Come on, let's get back upstairs. Give people some space to process their shame. They rode the elevator up to 15 in silence. When the doors opened, the floor was nearly empty. Most people were still downstairs or taking very long routes back to their desks to avoid awkward encounters. Daniel made his way to his workspace and sank into his chair, feeling like he'd just survived a hurricane. His computer dinged with an email notification. Daniel opened it automatically, his brain still not quite functioning normally. The message was from Vanessa Whitmore's office. Mr. Carter, please schedule a meeting with my assistant for later this week. I'd like to discuss your upcoming performance review. Thank you. VW. Daniel read the email 3 times, trying to extract meaning from the professional language. A meeting about his performance review, which was scheduled for next month anyway, but now she wanted to discuss it directly. His hands moved automatically, opening his calendar and finding a time. Thursday at 4 p.m. was available for both of them. He confirmed it, sent the response, and then sat staring at his screen. Patricia leaned over. Everything okay? Whitmore wants to meet with me, Thursday, about my performance review. Well, after what just happened, I'd say that's probably a good sign. She just publicly defended you and fired someone for harassing you. I don't think she's planning to turn around and terminate you. Right, logic, that makes sense. But Daniel's heart was still racing. The rest of the afternoon was surreal. People trickled back to their desks looking subdued and ashamed. No one met Daniel's eyes. No one spoke to him. The whispers had finally stopped, but the silence that replaced them was almost worse, heavy with embarrassment and guilt. At 3 o'clock, Daniel escaped to pick up Lucas, grateful to leave the strange atmosphere behind. The walk to Riverside Elementary felt like emerging from an alternate dimension into normal reality. Lucas came running out with his usual enthusiasm, holding up a spelling test with a bright red 100% at the top. "Dad, I got them all right, even rhythm, which is super hard." Daniel swept his son into a hug, holding on tight. "I'm so proud of you, buddy. You studied hard and it paid off. See, just like I told you this morning, do your best and whatever happens, happens." Lucas pulled back to look at his father. "Did you have your big day at work?" "Yeah, I did. How'd it go?" "Better than I expected, actually. A lot better." They walked home together, Lucas chattering about his perfect spelling test and the reading contest his class was starting. Daniel let the normal wash over him, grounding him back in what actually mattered. Work drama, office politics, mandatory meetings, none of it was as important as this. His son's hand in his, the pride in Lucas's voice as he talked about his achievements, the simple routine of their life together. At home, they celebrated the perfect spelling test with ice cream before dinner, a rare treat that made Lucas's day complete. They ate spaghetti and meatballs, Lucas's favorite, and watched an episode of his current favorite show. Bath time, pajamas, teeth brushing, all the familiar rhythms. At bedtime, Lucas looked up at his father seriously. "Dad, was today really okay at work? You seem different." "Different how?" "Less worried, like something got fixed." Daniel smiled, tucking the covers around his son. "You're right. Something did get fixed. A problem got solved that I wasn't sure could be solved. Told you. Do your best, and whatever happens, happens." "You're absolutely right, buddy. I should listen to you more often." "You should listen to me all the time. I'm very smart." Daniel laughed, the sound genuine and light. "Yes, you are. Now get some sleep, genius." Their nightly exchange of escalating affection followed, and Daniel turned out the light feeling more settled than he had in nearly 2 weeks. The meeting had been public and humiliating in some ways, but it had also been vindicating. Whitmore had made it clear, in front of everyone, that he'd done nothing wrong, that the rumors were false, that he was a valued employee, and she'd made sure there were consequences for those who'd tried to destroy him. Wednesday morning brought a different energy to the office. People were quiet, focused on their work with an intensity that suggested they were trying to prove their professionalism. The message boards had been scrubbed clean, Daniel checked during his coffee break, all the threads about him deleted, replaced with a new policy reminder about appropriate workplace communication. Several colleagues approached him throughout the day, offering awkward apologies. Jennifer admitted she'd forwarded some of the gossip without thinking about the impact. Michael confessed he'd laughed at jokes about the situation that weren't funny. Sarah said she should have defended him instead of staying silent. Daniel accepted each apology with as much grace as he could muster, though part of him wanted to ask where all this remorse had been when the rumors were actively destroying his reputation. But dwelling on that wouldn't help anything. The situation was resolved. He needed to move forward. Patricia brought him coffee mid-morning and sat on the edge of his desk. Morrison sent out an email to department heads. 3 more people are being written up for their participation in the rumor spreading. 2 are getting formal warnings in their files. 1 is being moved to a different department. Brandon was just the most visible offender then. Brandon was the orchestrator, but yeah, he had plenty of willing participants. She shook her head. "I've worked here 15 years, and I've never seen Whitmore that angry. She doesn't usually attend these kinds of meetings personally." "Why do you think she did this time?" Patricia studied him thoughtfully. "I think she saw an employee being crucified for a harmless mistake and decided enough was enough. Whitmore has a reputation for being ruthless in business, but she's also fair. She doesn't tolerate injustice, even when it's directed at someone she barely knows." Daniel thought about that as he worked through his morning. Whitmore didn't know him. They'd had maybe 3 direct interactions, all of them brief and professional. Yet she'd stood in front of the entire company and defended him. She'd fired someone. She'd promised consequences for others, all for an employee she had no personal connection to. It was, in its own way, remarkable. Thursday arrived with clear skies and unusually warm weather for March. Daniel got Lucas to school, endured the commute, and spent the day trying not to obsess about his 4 p.m. meeting with Whitmore. His calendar notification chimed at 3:45, giving him 15 minutes to prepare. Patricia noticed him straightening his tie for the third time. "You're going to be fine. This is just a normal performance review discussion." With the CEO, who I accidentally texted "I miss you" to, whose dramatic public defense of me became the talk of the entire company. "Okay, when you put it that way, it does sound slightly complicated." She smiled encouragingly. "But seriously, Daniel, after Tuesday's meeting, I think it's safe to say she doesn't have any negative feelings toward you. Just be yourself. You're good at your job. Let that speak for itself." At 3:55, Daniel took the elevator up to the 16th floor. The executive level was notably quieter and more luxurious than the working floors below. Thicker carpet, better art on the walls, an atmosphere of money and power. Whitmore's assistant, a professional woman in her 40s, greeted him with a pleasant smile. "Mr. Carter, Ms. Whitmore is expecting you. Please go right in." Daniel knocked on the heavy wooden door, and Whitmore's voice called out, "Come in." Her office was exactly what he'd expected. Large, impeccably organized, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Whitmore sat behind a massive desk that somehow didn't dwarf her presence. She gestured to the chairs across from her. "Mr. Carter, please, have a seat." Daniel sat, trying to keep his hands from fidgeting. This close, in the relative intimacy of her office, Whitmore seemed less intimidating than she had on Tuesday. Still professional and composed, but somehow more human. "Thank you for meeting with me," she began, her tone businesslike but not cold. "I know your annual performance review isn't scheduled until next month, but given recent events, I wanted to touch base with you personally." "I appreciate that, Ms. Whitmore. First, I want to apologize." That caught Daniel off guard. "I'm sorry?" "You were subjected to a hostile work environment for nearly 2 weeks, much of it stemming from a situation I inadvertently escalated." Her expression was serious. "When I received your text message, I should have simply responded privately to clarify the mistake. Instead, I came to your desk publicly, which created spectacle and gave ammunition to those looking for gossip." Daniel shook his head. "With respect, Ms. Whitmore, you're not responsible for how people chose to interpret that interaction. You came down to get clarification on a confusing message from an employee. That's perfectly reasonable. What happened after? The rumors, the harassment, that's on the people who chose to spread lies." "Perhaps. But I'm the CEO. I should have anticipated how my actions might be perceived." She leaned back slightly in her chair. "Regardless, I want to make it clear that the company takes full responsibility for failing to create an environment where such behavior was immediately shut down. That's a leadership failure, and I take it seriously." "I appreciate that, ma'am." "Second, I want to discuss your actual performance, which is why we're here." Whitmore pulled up something on her computer. "I've reviewed your file extensively over the past week. Your work is consistently excellent. Your client satisfaction scores are among the highest in your department. Your analyses are thorough and well-reasoned. Your Henderson portfolio presentation was particularly impressive." Daniel felt warmth spread through his chest. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." "It's not flattery, Mr. Carter, it's fact." She looked at him directly, those sharp gray eyes assessing. "You've been operating at a senior analyst level for the past 18 months, but your title and compensation don't reflect that. I'm recommending you for promotion to senior portfolio director with an accompanying salary increase of 18%. Daniel's brain stuttered. What? This isn't charity or compensation for what you've been through. This is recognition of work you've already been doing." Whitmore's expression remained neutral. "The promotion would come with additional responsibilities, of course. You'd be leading a small team, taking on larger accounts, and having more direct involvement in departmental strategy." "I don't know what to say." "You can say yes, or you can ask for time to consider. The offer stands either way." She paused. "I'm aware that you have custody of your son and that balancing work and single parenthood is challenging. If you need to negotiate different hours or remote work arrangements as part of this promotion, I'm open to that discussion." Daniel stared at her, struggling to process this turn of events. 2 weeks ago, he'd been terrified of losing his job. Now he was being offered a promotion and salary increase by the very person at the center of the rumors that had nearly destroyed him. "Ms. Whitmore, He gathered his thoughts. I'm honored by this offer, truly. But I have to ask, is this happening because of what I went through? Because if so, it's happening because you've earned it, she interrupted firmly. The timeline has been accelerated somewhat due to recent events, yes. I wanted to make a clear statement that your value to this company has nothing to do with unfounded rumors and everything to do with your actual contributions. But the promotion itself is based solely on merit. I don't make business decisions based on sympathy. Something in her tone made Daniel believe her absolutely. Vanessa Whitmore didn't strike him as someone who did anything out of sympathy or sentiment. If she was offering this, it was because she genuinely believed he'd earned it. Then, yes, he said, I accept. Thank you. A ghost of a smile crossed her face, gone so quickly Daniel almost thought he'd imagined it. Excellent. HR will reach out with the paperwork and details. The promotion will be effective the 1st of next month, giving you time to transition your current responsibilities and prepare for the new role. I won't let you down. I don't believe you will. She closed the file on her screen. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss? Daniel hesitated, then decided to just ask. Why did you come to the Tuesday meeting? Morrison could have handled it. Or Janet from HR. You didn't need to be there personally. Whitmore was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. I came because I needed everyone in this company to understand something. Workplace harassment will not be tolerated, not gossip, not bullying, not the casual cruelty that people sometimes convince themselves is harmless. Her voice was steady but intense. And I needed you to know that this company values you, that you have support at the highest level. That one mistake doesn't define your career here. The sincerity in her words hit Daniel harder than he expected. Thank you, he managed. That means more than I can express. She nodded once, acknowledging his gratitude without belaboring it. If there's nothing else, I'll let you get back to work. And Mr. Carter, the next time you want to tell your son you miss him, I recommend double-checking the recipient before you hit send. It took Daniel a second to realize she was making a joke. A small smile tugged at his lips. Lesson learned, Ms. Whitmore. Definitely learned. He stood, shook her hand, her grip was firm and professional, and left her office feeling like he was floating. A promotion, an 18% raise, public vindication, support from the CEO herself. 2 weeks ago, his world had been falling apart. Now, somehow, it had been put back together stronger than before. The elevator ride down to 15 gave him time to process. By the time he reached his desk, he'd composed himself enough to look relatively normal, though Patricia took one look at his face and raised her eyebrows. Well? Promotion. Senior Portfolio Director. 18% raise. Her eyes widened. Daniel, that's fantastic. Congratulations. Thanks. I'm still processing it, honestly. You earned it. Everyone who actually pays attention to your work knows you earned it. She grinned. And the timing sends a pretty clear message to anyone who might still have doubts about your qualifications. Daniel glanced at the clock. 3:22. Close enough to justify leaving early to get Lucas. He packed up his things, and for the first time in weeks, he walked to the elevator with his head up, not worried about who might be watching or whispering. The whispers had finally stopped, and if they hadn't, well, he had the CEO's explicit endorsement. Let them talk. Outside, the unusually warm March afternoon felt like a gift. Daniel walked to Lucas's school with something that felt almost like joy bubbling in his chest. Things were going to be okay. Better than okay. He had his job, his reputation, and now a promotion that would give Lucas even more security and opportunity. When his son came running out of the school building, Daniel caught him up in a spinning hug that made Lucas shriek with surprised laughter. Dad, what are you doing? Just really happy to see you, buddy. Really, really happy. Lucas pulled back to study his father's face. Something good happened at work. Something very good happened at work. Can we celebrate with ice cream? Daniel laughed, the sound free and genuine. Yeah, we can celebrate with ice cream. Come on. They walked to the ice cream shop 3 blocks from their apartment, and Daniel let Lucas order whatever he wanted. A double scoop of chocolate chip cookie dough with sprinkles and gummy bears. Definitely overkill, but today felt like a day for celebrating. Sitting in the shop's small seating area, watching his son attack his ice cream with pure joy, Daniel felt the last of the tension from the past 2 weeks finally release. He'd survived. More than survived. He'd come out the other side with proof that doing the right thing, working hard, and refusing to give up actually mattered. Lucas looked up from his ice cream, chocolate already smeared on his face. "Dad, you're doing the happy thing." "What's the happy thing?" "When you smile with your whole face, not just your mouth. You haven't done it in a while." Daniel reached across the small table and ruffled his son's hair. "Well, I'm doing it now. Because I've got the best kid in the world, a good job that just got even better, and chocolate chip ice cream. What more could a guy ask for? A bigger apartment? Okay, smart guy, finish your ice cream." They walked home in the golden late afternoon light, and Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Genuine optimism about the future. Not just hope that things would be okay, but actual excitement about what was coming next. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he could handle them. He'd proven that over the past 2 weeks. And with Lucas by his side in a career that finally seemed to be on track, the future looked brighter than it had in years. The rest of March passed in a blur of productivity and cautious optimism. Daniel threw himself into preparing for his new role, staying late some evenings to study the larger accounts he'd be managing, reaching out to colleagues in similar positions for advice, building frameworks for how he'd lead his future team. The work energized him in a way his old position hadn't in years. This felt like forward momentum, like building something instead of just maintaining it. The office atmosphere had shifted too, settling into a new normal that felt more genuine than before. People were cordial to Daniel, some even friendly, though there remained an undercurrent of embarrassment from those who'd participated in the rumor spreading. Jennifer brought him coffee one morning without being asked. Michael invited him to join the department lunch group, an invitation Daniel politely declined but appreciated nonetheless. Sarah asked his advice on a client presentation, treating him with the kind of professional respect he'd earned but hadn't always received. Patricia remained his steady ally, offering guidance on navigating his upcoming promotion and occasionally making dry observations about the office politics he'd survived. "You know what's funny?" she said one afternoon, leaning against his desk partition. "Half the people who were whispering about you 2 weeks ago are now falling over themselves to be on your good side. Success and CEO, approval, make for excellent social currency around here." Daniel looked up from his spreadsheet. "You sound cynical." "I sound experienced. There's a difference." She smiled. "But I'm glad things worked out. You deserve better than what happened, and you definitely deserve this promotion. Thanks, Patricia, for everything. You were one of the few people who didn't treat me like a pariah. I've been around long enough to know the difference between gossip and truth. Plus, I've seen how you are with Lucas. Any man that devoted to his kid isn't running around having secret affairs with the CEO." She straightened. "Speaking of which, don't forget you have that transition meeting with Morrison at 3. The transition meeting was one of several Daniel had scheduled to ensure his current accounts would be smoothly handed off to other analysts. Morrison had been particularly supportive since the mandatory staff meeting, going out of his way to praise Daniel's work and facilitate his move into the new position. At 3 o'clock sharp, Daniel knocked on Morrison's office door. Come in, come in." Morrison gestured to a chair, his usual stern expression softened by what looked like genuine pride. "How are you feeling about the promotion? Overwhelmed yet?" "Getting there," Daniel admitted, "but in a good way. I've been studying the Carmichael account and the Westfield portfolio. Both are more complex than anything I've handled before." "You'll rise to the challenge. You always do." Morrison pulled up something on his computer. "I wanted to talk to you about team composition. As senior portfolio director, you'll have 3 analysts reporting directly to you. I'm recommending Jennifer Chen, Marcus Williams, and Amy Zhang, all solid performers who could benefit from your mentorship." They spent the next 40 minutes discussing team dynamics, account strategies, and the administrative aspects of Daniel's new role. Morrison was thorough, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights from his own experience managing people. By the time the meeting wrapped up, Daniel felt both excited and slightly terrified by the responsibility he was taking on. "One more thing," Morrison said as Daniel stood to leave. "I want you to know that your promotion had been under discussion before any of this rumor nonsense started. Whitmore and I had talked about it back in February. You were already on track for advancement. The recent events just accelerated the timeline. The confirmation meant more than Morrison probably realized. I appreciate you telling me that. You earned this position, Daniel. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you otherwise. Walking back to his desk, Daniel felt a renewed sense of confidence. This wasn't charity or apology. This was recognition of work he'd already done. Potential Morrison and Whitmore both saw in him. The thought carried him through the rest of the afternoon and the commute to pick up Lucas. His son was waiting at the usual spot by the flagpole, but today he wasn't alone. A woman Daniel didn't recognize stood beside Lucas, her hand on his shoulder. She was perhaps 40, professionally dressed, with a warm smile that somehow didn't reach her eyes. Daniel's protective instincts kicked in immediately. He walked faster, closing the distance between them. "Dad!" Lucas's face lit up when he spotted his father. "This is Miss Harper. She wanted to talk to you." The woman extended her hand. "Mr. Carter? I'm Elizabeth Harper from the school district's Family Services Department. I was hoping we could have a brief conversation." Daniel's stomach dropped even as he shook her hand. Family Services. Nothing good ever started with Family Services. Is something wrong? Is Lucas okay? Lucas is fine. Perfectly fine. Miss Harper's smile was practiced, professional. "This is purely routine. We received an anonymous concern about Lucas's well-being, and district policy requires us to follow up on all reports." An anonymous concern. Daniel's voice came out flat. What kind of concern? Ms. Harper glanced at Lucas, then back to Daniel. "Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private. I don't want to alarm Lucas unnecessarily." Every alarm bell in Daniel's head was ringing, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Lucas, buddy, can you wait on that bench over there for a few minutes? Stay where I can see you." "Am I in trouble?" "No, absolutely not. Ms. Harper and I just need to have a grown-up conversation. I'll be right over there, okay?" Lucas looked between them uncertainly, then trudged to the nearby bench with his backpack dragging. Daniel watched until his son was seated, then turned back to Ms. Harper with barely controlled tension. "What is this about?" "As I said, we received an anonymous report expressing concern about Lucas's home environment. The caller suggested that you might be under significant work stress and that it could be affecting your ability to properly care for your son." White-hot anger flooded through Daniel. "Let me guess. This anonymous report came in sometime in the past 2 weeks?" Ms. Harper checked her tablet. "The report was filed last Friday, actually. Why do you ask?" "Because I recently went through a situation at work where someone was actively trying to damage my reputation, spreading false rumors, creating fake documents, sending harassing messages. This is clearly an extension of that harassment." "I understand your frustration, Mr. Carter, but regardless of the reporter's motives, we're required to follow up. Can you tell me about Lucas's current living situation? Who cares for him when you're at work?" Daniel took a breath, trying to channel his anger into clear, factual responses. "Lucas lives with me in a 2-bedroom apartment 3 blocks from here. I drop him off at school every morning and pick him up every afternoon at 3:15. On the rare occasions when I can't be here, my sister Marie picks him up. Lucas is fed, clothed, has his own room, completes his homework every night, and has never missed a medical appointment. His grades are excellent. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, can confirm that he's happy, healthy, and well cared for." Ms. Harper was making notes. "And your work situation? The report mentioned you might be facing employment difficulties." "I work at Carter and Associates downtown. I'm a portfolio analyst. Actually, I just received a promotion to senior portfolio director. My income is stable and more than sufficient to support us both. My work schedule is flexible enough to handle school pickup and any emergencies that arise." "The promotion is recent?" "It was offered last Thursday, effective April 1st. More notes. "And Lucas's mother?" The familiar ache settled in Daniel's chest. "She passed away 4 years ago. Cancer. I've had sole custody since then." Ms. Harper's expression softened genuinely for the first time. "I'm so sorry. That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was. It is. But Lucas and I have built a good life together. We take care of each other." "I can see that." She glanced toward where Lucas sat on the bench, swinging his legs and watching them anxiously. "Mr. Carter, I'm going to be honest with you. Nothing about this situation raises red flags for me. Lucas appears healthy and well-adjusted. You clearly have a close relationship with him. Your explanations are reasonable and verifiable, but I do need to complete my due diligence. What does that mean? It means I'll need to conduct a home visit, speak with Lucas's teacher, and review some basic documentation, medical records, proof of residence, that sort of thing. Standard procedure. Daniel felt like he was drowning. When? I can schedule the home visit for next week if that works for you. It's not invasive. I just need to verify that the living situation is appropriate and safe. Fine. Whatever you need. Daniel pulled out his phone. What's your email? I can send you my lease agreement, Lucas's medical records, contact information for his doctor, and his teacher. They exchanged information, and Ms. Harper's expression remained sympathetic. I know this feels intrusive, Mr. Carter, but try to understand it from our perspective. We receive a report. We have to investigate. Most of the time, like in your case, it's completely unfounded. But occasionally, these reports save children from genuinely harmful situations. We can't take that risk by ignoring them. I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. I'll be in touch early next week to schedule the visit. In the meantime, try not to worry too much. Everything you've told me checks out, and Lucas seems like a great kid. She smiled at Lucas and waved. Thank you for your cooperation. She walked away, and Daniel stood there for a moment trying to get his anger under control before approaching his son. This was Brandon's doing, had to be. One last vengeful strike from someone who'd lost everything. An anonymous report designed to cause maximum damage even from outside the company. Dad? Lucas had jumped up from the bench, his face worried. What did she want? Daniel forced a smile. Just routine school stuff, buddy. Nothing to worry about. She said she was from family services. That sounds serious. 8 years old and too perceptive by half. Daniel knelt down to his son's level. Someone told the school that they were worried about you, so Ms. Harper has to check to make sure you're okay, which you obviously are, so it'll all get sorted out quickly. Why would someone be worried about me? Because some people are nosy and don't know what they're talking about. Daniel stood, taking Lucas's hand. Come on, let's go home. I'll make your favorite dinner, and you can tell me about your day. They walked home through streets that had grown familiar over 4 years of this routine. Lucas chattered about science class. They were studying the solar system, but Daniel could hear the undercurrent of worry in his son's voice. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. At the apartment, Daniel went into overdrive, making sure everything was perfect for whenever Ms. Harper came to visit. He cleaned thoroughly, organized paperwork, made sure Lucas's room looked appropriately child-friendly but not neglected. All the while, anger simmered in his chest. After Lucas was asleep, Daniel sat in the living room and composed an email to Janet Wilcox in HR, explaining the family services report and his strong suspicion that it was connected to the workplace harassment. She responded within an hour. This is deeply concerning. I'll look into whether we can trace the report and will consult with legal about potential next steps. Please keep me updated on the family services investigation. We will support you through this. It was something, but it didn't erase the violation. Someone had tried to weaponize Child Protective Services against him, had used his love for his son as ammunition. The thought made Daniel physically ill. The home visit was scheduled for Tuesday afternoon. Ms. Harper arrived at 4 p.m., professional but friendly, and spent 45 minutes touring the apartment, reviewing documents, and talking with Lucas. She asked him about school, his friends, what he liked to do for fun. She asked if he felt safe at home, if he had enough to eat, if his dad took care of him when he was sick. Lucas answered every question with the straightforward honesty of a child who had nothing to hide. Yes, he felt safe. Yes, he always had food. Yes, his dad helped him with homework and read to him at bedtime and took him to the doctor when needed. Yes, he was happy. Ms. Harper left with a promise to conclude her investigation quickly. Based on what I've seen and heard, Mr. Carter, I don't anticipate any issues. You're clearly a devoted father, and Lucas is thriving. I'll submit my report by end of week. The relief Daniel felt was overwhelming, but it was tinged with exhaustion. This was supposed to be over. The rumors had been addressed. Brandon had been fired. Consequences had been distributed. But apparently the damage he'd caused continued to spread, reaching into Daniel's personal life, threatening the most important relationship he had. That evening, Daniel called his sister Marie to vent. She listened patiently, then offered her own perspective. Danny, you know what this proves? That you're doing everything right. If there was actually something wrong, if you were actually failing Lucas in any way, they'd have found it. But they didn't, because you're an amazing father who's raised an incredible kid despite everything you've been through. Her voice was fierce with pride. Some asshole tried to hurt you in the worst possible way, and it backfired because the truth is on your side. It doesn't feel like a win, because you're tired and you've been under siege for weeks. But it is a win. Lucas is fine. Your job is secure. You got promoted. The people who tried to destroy you either got fired or disciplined. You're standing, Danny. That matters. Her words helped, as they always did. Marie had been his rock since their parents died. His older sister by 3 years. She'd helped him navigate everything from his wife's illness to the challenges of single fatherhood. If she said he was doing okay, maybe he actually was. Friday brought the official email from Ms. Us almost Harper. After completing my investigation, I found no evidence of neglect or unsafe living conditions. Lucas is clearly well cared for and happy. This case is closed. Thank you for your cooperation. Daniel forwarded the email to Janet Wilcox with a note of relief. She responded immediately. Excellent news. Our legal team is exploring options regarding the false report. I'll keep you informed. The week rolled into April, and Daniel's promotion became official. He moved to a slightly larger desk in a different section of the floor, began his first meetings with his new team, and started taking on the complex accounts that would define his new role. The work was challenging but satisfying, requiring strategic thinking and leadership skills he'd been developing without fully realizing it. Jennifer Chen, one of his new analysts, was particularly enthusiastic about the team structure. I requested to be assigned to you specifically, she admitted during their first one-on-one meeting. I've been watching your work for the past year. The way you handle client concerns, how thorough your analysis is, I wanted to learn from that. The respect in her voice was genuine, and it reminded Daniel that his reputation wasn't built on rumors or scandals. It was built on years of solid work, of satisfied clients and successful portfolios. That foundation had survived the storm. It would continue to support him going forward. Marcus Williams and Amy Zhang were equally professional and eager to work under Daniel's guidance. Building the team dynamic took effort, establishing communication patterns, understanding each person's strengths and development areas, creating a culture of collaboration rather than competition. But Daniel found he enjoyed the challenge of leadership, of helping others grow while pushing himself to new levels of strategic thinking. 2 weeks into his new role, Daniel received an unexpected email from Vanessa Whitmore's assistant. Ms. Whitmore requests your presence at the quarterly executive strategy session next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Please confirm your attendance. Daniel stared at the message, pulse quickening. Quarterly executive strategy sessions were exactly what they sounded like. High-level meetings where company direction was discussed and major decisions were made. They were attended by executives, senior directors, and select department heads. Daniel had never been invited to one before. He confirmed his attendance and spent the weekend preparing, reviewing market trends and portfolio performance data, anticipating questions and formulating insights. This was an opportunity to prove himself at a higher level, to demonstrate that his promotion was justified. Tuesday morning arrived cold and rainy, the kind of April weather that couldn't decide if it was spring or still winter. Daniel dressed more carefully than usual, his best suit, the tie Marie had given him for Christmas, that she swore made him look successful. He dropped Lucas at school with their usual routine, then headed downtown with nerves and excitement warring in his stomach. The executive strategy session was held in a conference room on the 16th floor that Daniel had never entered before. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that could seat 20, technology that looked like it belonged in a sci-fi movie. He arrived 10 minutes early to find several other attendees already there, including Morrison, who gave him an encouraging nod. Vanessa Whitmore entered at exactly 10 a.m., followed by her senior leadership team. She took her seat at the head of the table and surveyed the assembled group with that penetrating gaze Daniel remembered from their previous encounters. Good morning. Thank you all for being here. We have significant ground to cover today regarding Q2 strategy and some structural changes I'm proposing for the fiscal year. Her voice was crisp and authoritative. I've invited several emerging leaders to join us today, including Daniel Carter from Portfolio Management. Some of you may remember Mr. Carter from recent events. I want to be clear that his presence here has nothing to do with those events and everything to do with his demonstrated strategic thinking and leadership potential. She looked directly at Daniel for a moment, and he felt both exposed and validated by her words. She was making sure no one could claim he was here for any reason other than merit. It was unnecessary. Most people in this room were professional enough not to care about office gossip, but the gesture was appreciated nonetheless. The meeting progressed through various strategic topics: market positioning, new client acquisition strategies, technology investments, competitive analysis. Daniel listened carefully, absorbing insights from executives with decades more experience than he had. When questions arose about portfolio management approaches, Morrison answered most of them, but occasionally he'd defer to Daniel for specific expertise. 2 hours into the meeting, Whitmore introduced a new topic. I want to discuss our approach to emerging markets. Current volatility has some of our competitors retreating, but I believe there's opportunity for those willing to be strategic. Daniel, you recently recommended significant reduction in emerging market exposure for the Henderson account. Walk us through your reasoning. Every eye in the room turned to him. This was a test, Daniel realized, not of his technical knowledge. Whitmore already knew his analysis was sound. This was a test of whether he could articulate complex strategy to senior leadership, whether he could defend his position under scrutiny from people who could end his career with a word. Daniel took a breath and began. The Henderson portfolio is retirement-focused, which means our primary obligation is capital preservation rather than aggressive growth. Emerging markets currently present 3 significant risk factors that outweigh potential returns for this particular client profile. He walked them through the analysis: regulatory pressures, currency volatility, geopolitical instability, supporting each point with data and specific examples. He acknowledged counterarguments, explained why he dismissed them for this particular situation, and clarified the conditions under which he might recommend a different approach. When he finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then one of the senior VPs, a man named Richard Blackwell, who Daniel had only ever seen from a distance, spoke up. That's conservative strategy, but it's well-reasoned. What about for clients with higher risk tolerance? Say, 20 years from retirement? Daniel answered, and another question came, and another. For 15 minutes, he fielded inquiries from some of the sharpest financial minds in the company, defending his positions, acknowledging limitations in his analysis, demonstrating both confidence and intellectual humility. Finally, Whitmore raised a hand, and the question stopped. Thank you, Daniel. That's exactly the kind of strategic thinking I wanted this group to hear. Please continue observing the rest of the meeting. Daniel sat back, adrenaline still pumping through his veins. He'd done well. He knew he had. The questions had been tough but fair, and he'd held his own against people with far more experience. The meeting concluded around 1 p.m. with action items distributed and follow-up sessions scheduled. As people filed out, Morrison caught Daniel's arm. That was impressive. You handled Blackwell's grilling like a veteran. Was that grilling? I thought he was just interested in the analysis. Morrison laughed. Blackwell doesn't ask questions he doesn't already know the answers to. He was testing whether you could think on your feet and defend your positions under pressure. You passed. Whitmore was speaking with 2 of her VPs near the windows, but as Daniel moved toward the exit, she glanced his way and gave a small nod. Not quite a smile, but definitely acknowledgement. Approval, even. Daniel returned to his desk feeling like he'd just completed a marathon and won. Patricia took one look at his face and grinned. Executive strategy session went well, I take it? I think so. I'm honestly not sure, but I didn't embarrass myself, which feels like a victory. Knowing you, you probably exceeded expectations. She handed him a stack of messages. Welcome back to reality. Marcus has questions about the Yamamoto account. Jennifer needs you to review her analysis before her client call, and Amy wants to discuss portfolio rebalancing strategies. Daniel settled into his chair, reviewing the messages and feeling a surge of satisfaction. This was his job now, not just managing his own work, but guiding others, contributing to company strategy, operating at a level he'd aspired to for years. The path here had been unexpected and often painful, but he'd arrived nonetheless. The afternoon passed in a blur of team meetings and client reviews. At 3 o'clock, Daniel left to pick up Lucas, the routine that anchored every workday, no matter how chaotic things got. His son came running out of school with news about a science project on the solar system. He'd chosen Jupiter and was excited about the storm systems and dozens of moons. Can we go to the library this weekend? I need books about Jupiter for my research. Absolutely. We'll make a whole afternoon of it. Daniel ruffled Lucas's hair. How was the rest of your day? Good. Tyler and I are both doing planets in our solar system group. He's doing Mars. We're going to see whose presentation is better. Healthy competition. I like it. They walked home through the early April afternoon, the weather having cleared to reveal tentative sunshine. At the apartment, Lucas spread his homework across the kitchen table while Daniel started preparing dinner, chicken stir-fry. Vegetables included, despite Lucas's protests about the broccoli. Dad, can I ask you something? Always, buddy. Are things better now? At work, I mean. You seem happier. Daniel paused, his vegetable chopping. Yeah, things are definitely better. I got that promotion I told you about, remember? And the problems I was having all got sorted out. The problems with the mean people who were saying untrue things? Sometimes Daniel forgot how much Lucas understood. Yes, those problems. They're resolved now. Good. I didn't like when you were sad. Lucas looked down at his math worksheet. It made me worried. Daniel moved to sit beside his son, turning the chair so they were face to face. Hey, look at me. I know the past few weeks were hard. I know you noticed I was stressed and worried, but I need you to understand something important. None of that was your fault, and none of it was anything you needed to fix. That's grown-up stuff, and it's my job to handle it and protect you from it. But I want to help. You do help. Every single day. You know how? Daniel tapped Lucas's chest gently. You're a good kid who works hard in school and makes me proud. You give me a reason to keep pushing forward even when things are difficult. That's the help I need from you. Well, Lucas thought about that. Like how you're my reason to do my homework even when I want to play Xbox instead. Exactly like that. Okay. Lucas returned to his worksheet, seemingly satisfied. Can you help me with number 7? I don't understand what they're asking. They worked through math problems together while the stir-fry sizzled on the stove, and Daniel felt that familiar contentment that came from these simple moments. This was what mattered, not office politics or executive strategy sessions or promotions. This. His son at the kitchen table struggling with division problems and talking about Jupiter's moons. The ordinary miracle of their life together. Dinner was punctuated by Lucas's enthusiastic descriptions of everything he'd learned about Jupiter so far. Did Daniel know that the Great Red Spot was a storm that had been raging for hundreds of years? Did he know that Europa might have an ocean under its ice? Did he know that Jupiter was so big you could fit all the other planets inside it? Daniel knew most of it from his own childhood fascination with space, but he let Lucas teach him anyway, asking questions and expressing appropriate amazement. This was how kids learned, not just facts, but the confidence that came from sharing knowledge, from being heard and taken seriously. After dinner, they watched a documentary about the solar system that Lucas had found online. It was probably aimed at an audience older than 8, but Lucas was captivated, pausing frequently to take notes in the spiral notebook he'd designated as his Jupiter Research Journal. At bedtime, Lucas brought the notebook with him, setting it carefully on his nightstand. Tomorrow after school, can we start planning my presentation? I want it to be really good. We'll start planning tomorrow. Now get some sleep. Their nightly ritual of escalating affection followed, and Daniel turned out the light with a heart that felt fuller than it had in weeks. Everything wasn't perfect. There were still challenges ahead, still adjustments to make with his new role, still recovery needed from the damage the rumors had caused. But they were okay. He and Lucas were okay. That was enough. The next few weeks settled into a new rhythm. Daniel grew more comfortable in his leadership role, building genuine rapport with his team and earning respect from colleagues at higher levels. The quarterly executive strategy sessions became a regular invitation. Apparently, Whitmore had decided his perspective was valuable enough to warrant continued inclusion. Patricia was promoted to senior analyst, a move that felt long overdue and that she accepted with characteristic dry humor. Took them long enough to notice I've been doing senior-level work for 3 years. Jennifer exceeded expectations on every project, her enthusiasm and sharp analytical mind making her a standout performer. Marcus developed a knack for client relations that complemented his technical skills. Amy's attention to detail caught errors that could have been costly. Together, they became a cohesive unit that other departments started requesting for collaborative projects. The family services case remained officially closed, though Janet Wilcox informed Daniel that their legal team had traced the anonymous report to a phone number registered to Brandon Keller. He made the call 2 days after being terminated. We've documented this for potential legal action, though pursuing it is your choice. Daniel considered that information carefully before deciding not to press charges. Brandon had already lost his job and his reputation. Pursuing legal action would keep Daniel entangled in that chapter of his life, would require time and energy better spent on moving forward. Sometimes the best revenge was simply living well. Lucas's Jupiter presentation was a resounding success, complete with a poster board covered in facts and hand-drawn diagrams. Tyler's Mars presentation was equally impressive, and they both received high marks from Mrs. Patterson. The projects ended up displayed in the school hallway for Parent Night, where Daniel stood with other parents admiring the work and feeling absurdly proud of his son's careful research and creative presentation. On a Friday evening in late April, as Daniel and Lucas walked home from their weekly pizza dinner tradition, his phone chimed with an email notification. He glanced at it out of habit, expecting something work-related that could wait until Monday. Instead, it was from Vanessa Whitmore's office. Your Q1 performance review is complete. Results have been filed with HR. Well done, Mr. Carter. It was brief, professional, and somehow warmer than any lengthy praise could have been. Daniel smiled, slipping his phone back into his pocket. What's funny? Lucas asked, noticing his father's expression. Nothing's funny, just something good at work. More good things? You've had lots of good things lately. I have. And you know what? I think we've earned them. They walked the rest of the way home through streets lit by the golden light of late afternoon. Spring finally asserting itself after a long winter. Flowers were blooming in window boxes. Trees were budding green. The city felt alive with possibility. At home, Daniel found the note Lucas had drawn weeks ago. The picture of him at his desk, looking serious and focused. It was still tucked into his work bag where he'd kept it during the worst of the rumors, a reminder of how his son saw him. Not as someone scandalous or inappropriate, but as someone who worked hard and cared deeply. He pulled it out now and looked at it properly. The drawing was simple but captured something true. His concentrated expression, the papers spread around him, the coffee cup that was always present. Lucas had drawn him exactly as he was. A father doing his best, working hard to provide, focused on what mattered. Daniel pinned the drawing to the small bulletin board in his home office, right where he could see it while working. A reminder, whenever he needed it, of what he was working for and who he was working to be. The 3 accidental words that had nearly destroyed everything, I miss you, had instead revealed the truth about his life, the strength of his dedication, the depth of his integrity, the quiet respect of people who recognized real character when they saw it. And in the end, that truth had been enough to weather the storm and come out stronger on the other side. May arrived with the kind of warmth that made people forget winter had ever existed. The city transformed almost overnight, trees fully leafed out, flowers blooming in every available patch of dirt, people shedding their heavy coats and rediscovering outdoor spaces they'd abandoned months ago. For Daniel, the changing season felt symbolic, as if nature itself was confirming what he already knew. The worst was behind him. His team had settled into a productive rhythm that exceeded even his optimistic expectations. Jennifer had just closed a major new client account with a presentation that Morrison called flawless. Marcus had identified a portfolio inefficiency that saved the firm nearly $200,000 across multiple accounts. Amy's meticulous documentation had caught a potential compliance issue before it became a problem. Together, they were building a reputation as the go-to team for complex portfolio management. Daniel found that leadership suited him better than he'd anticipated. The strategic thinking, the mentorship, the satisfaction of watching others grow and succeed, it all felt more meaningful than his previous work had been. He still put in long hours, but now they felt purposeful in a way they hadn't before. On a Tuesday morning in mid-May, Daniel arrived at the office to find an unexpected email in his inbox. The sender was listed simply as Whitmore V, and the subject line read, Quarterly Leadership Breakfast, May 19th. He opened it to find a formal invitation to an exclusive event held the third Thursday of each quarter. The breakfast brought together the company's top performers and emerging leaders for what the email described as strategic discussion and relationship building in an informal setting. Daniel had heard about these breakfasts, but had never been invited to one. They were legendary within the company, the kind of career-defining networking opportunity that people talked about in hushed, reverent tones. Patricia noticed his expression when she arrived a few minutes later. "You look like you just won the lottery." "Whitmore invited me to the quarterly leadership breakfast." Her eyebrows shot up. "That's huge, Daniel. Those invitations don't go to just anyone. Morrison's been attending for years, but at the analyst level, almost never." "I'm not an analyst anymore." "You've been a director for 6 weeks. Most people wait years before getting that invitation." She smiled warmly. "But you're not most people. You earned this." The breakfast was held at an upscale restaurant 3 blocks from the office, in a private room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Daniel arrived at 7:30 a.m. sharp, dressed in his best suit and trying not to feel intimidated by the assembled group. There were maybe 25 people total, senior executives, department heads, a handful of directors like himself who'd clearly distinguished themselves somehow. Vanessa Whitmore stood near the windows, speaking with Richard Blackwell and another senior VP. She looked more relaxed than Daniel had ever seen her, dressed in a navy blazer and slacks rather than her usual severe suits. When she noticed Daniel enter, she excused herself from the conversation and approached him. "Mr. Carter, I'm glad you could make it." "Thank you for the invitation, Ms. Whitmore. I'm honored to be here. You've earned your place in this room. Your team's performance over the past 6 weeks has been exceptional." She gestured toward the buffet. "Help yourself to breakfast. Then I'd like you to meet a few people." Over the next hour, Whitmore introduced Daniel to key players in the company he'd only known by reputation. She didn't make a big production of it, just casual introductions that somehow conveyed his value without seeming forced. Each person she introduced him to treated Daniel with immediate respect, clearly taking their cue from Whitmore's implicit endorsement. Richard Blackwell, who'd grilled Daniel during his first executive strategy session, shook his hand warmly. "Good to see you again, Carter. I've been following your team's work. That Carmichael account restructuring was particularly impressive." "Thank you, sir. Jennifer Chen deserves most of the credit for that one. She identified the core issues and built the solution framework. But you guided the process and approved the strategy. That's what leadership looks like." Blackwell smiled. "Keep developing talent like that, and you'll be sitting at the senior table sooner than you think." The breakfast itself was less formal than Daniel had expected. Yes, there was discussion of strategy and market trends, but there was also laughter, storytelling, the kind of authentic conversation that built genuine professional relationships. Daniel found himself seated between Morrison and a department head named Susan Chen, who ran the firm's international division. Susan was perhaps 50, sharp-eyed and direct in a way that reminded Daniel of Whitmore. "Richard tells me you turned down his offer to poach you for his division?" Daniel blinked. "I wasn't aware that was an offer, ma'am. Morrison mentioned he'd suggested it to you, but I thought it was just exploratory." In this company, when Richard Blackwell suggests something, it's usually more than exploratory. "But Morrison convinced me you were better utilized where you are building your current team." She studied Daniel thoughtfully. "He also said you have integrity that can't be taught. That's rare in this industry." The comment caught Daniel off guard. "I appreciate that. I just try to do the right thing and not cut corners." "That's exactly what integrity is, and it's exactly why you'll go far here if you want to." Susan returned to her breakfast. The subject apparently closed, but the validation lingered. As the breakfast wound down and people began excusing themselves to start their workdays, Whitmore approached Daniel again. "Walk with me back to the office?" It wasn't really a question, so Daniel gathered his things and fell into step beside her. They left the restaurant and turned toward the office building 3 blocks away, the morning sun warm on their faces. For a minute, they walked in comfortable silence. Then Whitmore spoke. "I wanted to talk to you away from the office environment. How are you doing, really, after everything that happened?" The question surprised Daniel with its directness and what seemed like genuine concern. "I'm doing well. Better than I expected to be, honestly. The promotion, the team, being included in things like this breakfast, it's been validating in ways I didn't know I needed. And the harassment, the family services investigation, all resolved. The family services case was closed weeks ago. As for the rest, Daniel paused, choosing his words carefully. I won't lie and say it didn't affect me. Having my reputation attacked, having my relationship with my son weaponized, that was the hardest thing I've faced since my wife died. But it's over now. I'm focused on moving forward. Whitmore nodded, her expression thoughtful. I admire that. Many people would still be dwelling on the injustice, letting it consume them. You've channeled it into productive action instead. I have a son who depends on me. I can't afford to fall apart or get stuck in bitterness. I have to keep moving forward for his sake. That kind of resilience is rare. She glanced at him. I'm going to be direct with you, Mr. Carter. I see significant leadership potential in you. Not just in portfolio management, but in broader strategic roles. The way you handle pressure, develop talent, think long-term, those are qualities this company needs at higher levels. Daniel's heart rate picked up. I appreciate your confidence in me. This isn't flattery. This is strategic planning. They'd reached the office building, but Whitmore stopped before entering. Over the next year, I'll be creating opportunities for you to demonstrate your capabilities in different contexts. Some will be challenging. Some may push you outside your comfort zone. But if you continue performing at your current level, I see you on a trajectory towards senior leadership within 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years to senior leadership. Most people took 15 or 20 years to reach that level. Daniel felt dizzy with the implications. Ms. Whitmore, I don't know what to say. Thank you for believing in me. Don't thank me yet. Earn it. But there was the ghost of a smile on her face. Now, let's get to work. We both have full schedules. They entered the building together, and Daniel felt like he was walking on air. The validation from Whitmore, the respect from executives like Blackwell and Susan Chen, the trajectory being laid out before him, it was almost overwhelming. 6 months ago, he'd been terrified of losing his job. Now he was being groomed for senior leadership. The day proceeded normally enough, team meetings, client calls, portfolio reviews, but Daniel moved through it with renewed energy. At lunch, Patricia cornered him in the break room. You've been smiling all morning. I'm assuming the breakfast went well? Whitmore walked me back to the office. She said I'm on a trajectory towards senior leadership within 3 to 5 years. Patricia's eyes widened. Daniel, that's incredible. That's the kind of endorsement people build entire careers hoping to receive. I know, I still can't quite believe it's real. Believe it. Whitmore doesn't say things she doesn't mean, and she doesn't invest in people she doesn't think will deliver. Patricia squeezed his arm. I'm really proud of you. After everything you went through, you deserve this. The afternoon brought an unexpected complication in the form of a terse email from a client named Gregory Hampton. The Hampton account was one Daniel had inherited with his promotion, a 7-figure portfolio belonging to a retired executive with strong opinions and a tendency toward micromanagement. The email expressed serious concerns about recent portfolio adjustments and requested an immediate meeting. Daniel reviewed the adjustments in question. They'd been made by Amy based on market analysis that was sound and aligned with the client's stated risk tolerance and investment goals. But Hampton was clearly unhappy, and unhappy clients were never good news. He scheduled the meeting for the next day and spent the evening preparing, reviewing every decision, every data point, every rationale. When he finally picked up Lucas, his son immediately noticed the tension. Bad news at work? Just a challenging situation. One of my clients isn't happy with some decisions my team made. Lucas considered this as they walked. Is he right to be unhappy? No, I don't think so. The decisions were correct based on the information we had and what he told us he wanted. But sometimes people change their minds about what they want, or they don't like seeing temporary losses even when they're part of a long-term strategy. So you have to convince him you're right? More like I have to help him understand why we made the choices we did and rebuild his trust in our judgment. Daniel ruffled Lucas's hair. It's part of the job. Not the fun part, but an important part. The meeting with Gregory Hampton took place at 10 a.m. the next day in one of the firm's smaller conference rooms. Hampton arrived with his usual brusque energy, a man in his late 60s who'd built a successful career through force of will and wasn't shy about expressing his opinions. Carter, I assume you've read my email. I have, Mr. Hampton, and I've thoroughly reviewed the portfolio adjustments in question. I'd like to walk you through the rationale and address your concerns. For the next 45 minutes, Daniel presented data, explained market conditions, and demonstrated how every decision aligned with Hampton's stated investment objectives. He acknowledged the temporary losses that had triggered Hampton's concern, but showed how they were part of a broader strategy that was already beginning to recover. Hampton listened, occasionally interrupting with pointed questions that Daniel answered patiently and thoroughly. Finally, the older man sat back in his chair. "All right, I hear you. The analysis is sound." He paused. "But I don't like surprises, Carter. If my portfolio is going to take a hit, even a temporary one, I want to know about it before it happens, not after." "That's completely fair, sir, and that's on me. I should have ensured better communication about the potential short-term volatility. Going forward, my team and I will provide more detailed updates on any significant changes and their potential impacts." Hampton studied Daniel for a moment. "You're different from Morrison. He's brilliant with strategy, but sometimes forgets clients or people, not just numbers on a spreadsheet. You seem to understand both sides." "I try to. At the end of the day, this is your money, your future, your peace of mind. My job is to maximize returns while respecting your comfort level and keeping you informed." "Good answer." Hampton stood, extending his hand. "We'll continue working together, but I'm going to hold you to that promise about communication." "I wouldn't expect anything less, sir." After Hampton left, Daniel sat in the conference room for a moment, letting the tension drain from his shoulders. The meeting had gone well, but it highlighted something important. With leadership came accountability, not just for his own work, but for his entire team's performance. Any mistakes they made reflected on him. Any client relationships that soured were ultimately his responsibility to repair. It was a weight he was still learning to carry. Back at his desk, Daniel found an email from Amy apologizing for not anticipating Hampton's reaction to the portfolio changes. He responded immediately, praising her analysis and taking full responsibility for the communication failure. Leadership, he was learning, meant protecting your team while holding yourself accountable. The rest of May passed in a blur of productive chaos. Daniel's team continued to excel, building a reputation that led to increased client demand. He found himself working longer hours than he had as a senior analyst, but the work felt more meaningful. He was building something now, not just maintaining it. Lucas's school year was winding down, and Daniel attended the end-of-year performance where his son had a small speaking role in a play about the solar system. Watching Lucas deliver his lines with confidence and enthusiasm, Daniel felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with work achievements. This was what mattered most. His son thriving, happy, secure. On the last day of May, Daniel received an envelope delivered by internal mail. Inside was a handwritten note on expensive stationery. "Mr. Carter, your quarterly review exceeded expectations in all categories. Your leadership development is progressing well. Keep up the excellent work. V. Whitmore." Daniel read the note 3 times, then carefully filed it in his desk drawer alongside Lucas's drawing. These were his touchstones now, reminders of what he was working for and who believed in him. June brought summer vacation and new logistical challenges. Marie agreed to watch Lucas during work hours 3 days a week, and Daniel enrolled his son in a STEM camp the other 2 days. They established new routines, new rhythms, navigating the changed schedule with the adaptability that had become second nature to them both. One evening in mid-June, Daniel was making dinner when Lucas appeared in the kitchen doorway looking unusually serious. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always, buddy." "Do you ever miss Mom?" The question hit Daniel like a physical blow. They talked about Lucas's mother regularly. Daniel made sure of that, wanting his son to remember her and know it was okay to grieve. But the directness of this question suggested something deeper was happening. Daniel turned off the stove and moved to sit at the kitchen table, gesturing for Lucas to join him. "I miss her every single day. Not the same way I did right after she died, when it felt like I couldn't breathe. But I still miss her presence, her voice, the way she made everything feel lighter." Lucas nodded, processing this. "Sometimes I can't remember what she looked like without looking at pictures. That makes me feel bad." "Hey, look at me." Daniel waited until Lucas met his eyes. "That's not bad. That's normal. You were only 4 when she died. The fact that you remember her at all, her laugh, the songs she sang, the way she smelled like vanilla, that's amazing. And the pictures help us hold on to those memories. That's why we have them." Tyler's mom asked me about her today. She wanted to know if I missed having a mom like the other kids. Daniel felt anger flash through him. That was an inappropriate question for her to ask you. It's okay. I told her I do miss having a mom, but that you do both jobs pretty well. Lucas managed a small smile. I said you're like 1.5 parents combined. Despite the emotion clogging his throat, Daniel laughed. 1.5 parents. I'll take it. The thing is, Dad, I've been thinking. You're always taking care of me. But who takes care of you? The perceptiveness of the question nearly undid Daniel. You take care of me, buddy, every day. Just by being you, by making me proud, by giving me a reason to keep working and building a good life for us. But, who do you talk to when you're sad or worried? You always say I can talk to you about my feelings, but you don't really talk about yours. Daniel took a breath, choosing his words carefully. You're right. I tend to keep my worries to myself because I don't want you to feel responsible for my feelings. That's my job as your dad. But you make a good point. I should be better about sharing when I'm struggling, so you can see that it's okay to have hard feelings and ask for support. So are you going to start telling me when you're sad? I'll try to be more honest with you about when I'm having a tough day. But I want you to understand that my tough days are never your fault, and they're never your responsibility to fix. Deal? Deal. Lucas seemed satisfied with this. Can we have spaghetti for dinner? The abrupt subject change was so typically 8-year-old that Daniel had to smile. We had spaghetti 3 days ago, but it's my favorite. How about we compromise and have pasta with different sauce? Fine. But can we have garlic bread? We can have garlic bread. Crisis averted. They moved on to dinner preparation, but the conversation stuck with Daniel. Lucas was growing up, becoming more emotionally aware, more attuned to the complexities of their life together. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. That weekend, they visited Marie for a family barbecue. Daniel's sister took one look at him and pulled him aside while Lucas played with her neighbor's dog in the backyard. You look tired. I'm always tired. I have an 8-year-old and a demanding job. This is different. This is that bone-deep exhaustion that says you're pushing too hard. She studied him with the same perceptive gaze Lucas had inherited. When's the last time you did something just for yourself? Not for Lucas? Not for work? Just for you. Daniel thought about it and came up blank. I don't know. Before the promotion, probably. That's not sustainable, Danny. You can't pour from an empty cup. You need to take care of yourself too, or you're going to burn out. I'm fine. You're functioning. That's not the same as fine. Marie's voice was gentle but firm. I'm not saying neglect Lucas or slack off at work. I'm saying take an evening for yourself once in a while. Read a book, go to a movie, meet some friends for drinks. Something that reminds you you're a person, not just a father and an employee. The words resonated more than Daniel wanted to admit. When had he last done something purely for his own enjoyment? When had he last had a conversation that wasn't about Lucas's school or work projects or household logistics? I'll think about it, he promised. Don't think. Do. Lucas and I are having a sleepover next Friday. You're going to drop him off, and then you're going to spend the evening doing something that has nothing to do with parental or professional responsibility. That's an order. Despite himself, Daniel smiled. Yes, ma'am. The following Friday, he dropped Lucas at Marie's apartment with his overnight bag and a list of his son's current favorites, foods, movies, bedtime routines. Lucas was thrilled at the prospect of a sleepover with his aunt, barely pausing to hug his father goodbye before running off to explore Marie's collection of books. Go, Marie said, physically pushing Daniel toward the door. Don't come back until tomorrow morning. Lucas and I are going to have pizza and watch movies and stay up too late. You're going to remember what it feels like to be Daniel Carter, not just Lucas's dad. Standing on the sidewalk outside Marie's building, Daniel felt oddly unmoored. A Friday evening stretching before him with no responsibilities, no schedule, no one depending on him for anything. The freedom was disorienting. He ended up walking through the city as twilight settled, no particular destination in mind. He grabbed dinner at a small restaurant he'd been passing for years but never entered. An Italian place with candles on the tables and an extensive wine list. He ordered pasta that wasn't spaghetti, drank a glass of wine, and read the novel he'd been carrying in his briefcase for 3 months but never found time to open. It was peaceful, quiet, almost meditative. After dinner, he wandered into a bookstore and browsed without purpose, eventually buying 2 novels and a photography book about the city. Then he went to a late showing of a movie he'd been vaguely curious about, some thriller that Patricia had recommended weeks ago. By the time he returned to his empty apartment at 11:30 p.m., Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in months. Relaxed. The constant low-grade tension he'd been carrying had eased. His shoulders didn't ache, his jaw wasn't clenched. He slept deeply and woke late, luxuriating in the rare absence of an early alarm. Then he picked up Lucas from Marie's around 10 a.m., listening to his son's enthusiastic recap of their evening while feeling genuinely recharged for the first time in recent memory. "Did you have a good night?" Lucas asked as they walked home. "I really did, actually. Your aunt was right. I needed that." "She's smart. You should listen to her more." "Another good point. You Carters are full of wisdom." July brought the company's mid-year reviews and a surprise opportunity. Whitmore was restructuring the international division and wanted Daniel to spend 3 weeks working directly with Susan Chen's team in London. It would mean being away from Lucas for longer than he'd ever been since becoming a single father, but it was also exactly the kind of developmental opportunity Whitmore had mentioned, a chance to demonstrate capabilities outside his comfort zone. Daniel agonized over the decision for 2 days before finally accepting. Marie agreed to stay at his apartment and take care of Lucas, turning it into an adventure for his son. 3 weeks with Aunt Marie became the exciting new development rather than 3 weeks without Dad. The London assignment was intense, long days working with international portfolio teams, navigating different regulatory environments, learning new markets and client bases. But it was also exhilarating. Daniel found he could adapt quickly, that the skills he'd developed translated across contexts, that his leadership approach worked even with teams who'd never met him before. He video called Lucas every evening, hearing about his son's days with Marie, the summer camp activities, the books they were reading together. The calls kept him grounded, reminded him what he was working toward, even as he pushed himself in this new challenge. When he returned to the States 3 weeks later, both Lucas and Daniel had grown in different ways. Lucas had gained independence and confidence from his time with Marie. Daniel had gained international experience and proven to himself that he could handle high-level work even outside his familiar environment. Susan Chen sent a glowing report to Whitmore. Daniel exceeded expectations in every category. His analytical skills are exceptional, but what impressed me most was his ability to build relationships and earn trust quickly. He has significant potential for global leadership roles. Whitmore forwarded the email to Daniel with a single line added, "Told you, keep it up." August brought Lucas's 9th birthday, celebrated with a party at the park that somehow ended up including 15 kids and their parents. Daniel orchestrated games and cake and presents, watching his son laugh and play with the same fierce joy he'd had as a toddler. 9 years old, growing up too fast and yet exactly on schedule. That evening, after the guests had left and the presents were unwrapped, Lucas curled up beside Daniel on the couch. "Best birthday ever, Dad." "Yeah? Better than last year when we went to the Science Museum?" "Different kind of best. That was awesome. This was—" Lucas searched for words. "This felt like having a real family. All my friends and Aunt Marie and you making everything perfect. It felt normal in a really good way." Normal. After everything they'd been through, losing Lucas's mother, navigating single parenthood, surviving the workplace crisis, normal was an achievement worth celebrating. "I'm glad, buddy. You deserve all the good things." September brought a new school year and new routines. Lucas started 4th grade with a teacher known for being demanding but excellent. Daniel's team took on their largest client yet, a portfolio worth over $20 million that required coordinated effort from everyone. The fall was shaping up to be busy but manageable. One afternoon in late September, Daniel was reviewing quarterly projections when his phone rang with an internal extension he didn't immediately recognize. He answered to find Vanessa Whitmore's assistant on the line. "Mr. Carter? Ms. Whitmore would like to see you in her office at 4 p.m. today if you're available." "Of course, I'll be there." He spent the next 2 hours trying not to speculate about the purpose of the meeting and failing completely. Whitmore occasionally called people in for strategy discussions or to assign new projects, but she usually did so via email or in scheduled meetings. An impromptu summons to her office was unusual enough to trigger anxiety. At 3:55 p.m., Daniel presented himself at Whitmore's office. Her assistant waved him in with a smile. Whitmore was standing by her windows, looking out over the city. She turned when Daniel entered and gestured to the seating area rather than her desk. Two chairs arranged conversationally rather than the formal desk and supplicant setup. "Thank you for coming on short notice. Please sit." Daniel sat, trying to read her expression and finding it as neutral as always. Whitmore settled into the other chair and looked at him directly. "I'm going to be blunt, Mr. Carter. I'm creating a new position, Vice President of Strategic Portfolio Development. It's a senior leadership role that would involve overseeing multiple teams, working directly with our largest clients, and contributing to company-wide strategy. The position reports directly to me." Daniel's brain stuttered. Vice President? That was 2 levels above where he currently sat. "I want you for the role," Whitmore continued. "You've demonstrated every quality I look for in senior leadership. Strategic thinking, integrity, the ability to develop talent, grace under pressure, results that speak for themselves." She paused. "But I need to know if you want it." Yes, of course I want it." Daniel tried to process what she was saying. "But I've only been a director for 6 months. Isn't this too fast?" Conventional wisdom would say yes, but conventional wisdom also said you shouldn't have been promoted to director after only 6 years with the firm. "You've exceeded every expectation, Daniel. The question isn't whether you're ready. The question is whether you want the increased responsibility, the higher profile, the pressure that comes with senior leadership." "What about Lucas? The role would require more hours, more travel?" "It would, which is why I'm asking if you want it rather than simply offering it. You'd have flexibility to structure some aspects of the role around your parenting responsibilities. I'm not asking you to choose between your career and your son, but I'm asking if you're willing to take on something demanding while continuing to be the father Lucas needs." Daniel thought about Lucas at 9 years old, thriving and happy. He thought about Marie's support, the routines they'd built, the resilience they'd both developed. He thought about the trajectory Whitmore was offering, a path to senior leadership that most people would kill for. "I want it," he said firmly. "I want the challenge, the opportunity to contribute at that level, and I believe I can do it while still being present for Lucas. It won't be easy, but the important things never are." Whitmore smiled, a real smile, warm and approving. "That's the answer I was hoping for. Welcome to the senior leadership team, Mr. Carter. The promotion is effective November 1st, which gives you 5 weeks to transition your current team and prepare for the new role." They spent the next 30 minutes discussing specifics, compensation, responsibilities, reporting structures, team composition. By the time Daniel left her office, his head was spinning with possibilities and challenges, and the sheer weight of what he'd just accepted. He called Marie from the elevator. "I just got promoted to vice president." "What? Danny, that's incredible. How is this even possible? You've been a director for like 5 minutes." 6 months, and apparently I impressed the right people." He could hear the smile in his own voice. "I need to tell Lucas. Can I bring him by tomorrow so we can all celebrate together?" "Absolutely. I'm so proud of you, little brother. You've earned this." That evening, Daniel sat Lucas down and explained the promotion in terms his son could understand. "So you'll be a vice president? That sounds really important." "It is important. It means I'll have more responsibility and probably work some longer hours sometimes. But it also means more money, which means we can do things we couldn't do before. Maybe take a real vacation next summer. Maybe move to a bigger apartment." Lucas's eyes widened. "Could we get a place with 2 bathrooms so I don't have to wait when you're in the shower?" Daniel laughed. "Yeah, buddy. We could definitely get a place with 2 bathrooms. Then I think you should take it, even if you have to work more sometimes." Lucas paused thoughtfully. "Are you happy about it?" "I'm really happy about it. Proud, too. This is something I've been working toward for a long time." "Then I'm happy, too. And proud of you." They celebrated with ice cream, because apparently every good thing in their lives warranted ice cream, and Lucas drew a picture of his father with VP written in big letters across the top. Daniel added it to the bulletin board in his office, right next to the original drawing of him at his desk. The next 5 weeks were a controlled chaos of transition planning. Daniel promoted Jennifer to take over his current team, spending hours mentoring her through the leadership transition. He met with his future team members, began learning the intricacies of the largest accounts, and attended senior leadership meetings to understand the dynamics he'd be joining. Through it all, he maintained his commitment to Lucas. School pickup most days, homework help every evening, bedtime routines that remained sacred regardless of work pressure. It required careful time management and occasional creative solutions, but Daniel had learned long ago that his son had to come first. On the evening before his official start date as vice president, Daniel tucked Lucas into bed with their usual ritual. "Tomorrow's a big day for you," Lucas said. "It is. I'm a little nervous, actually." "Really? But you're really good at your job." Being good at something doesn't mean you never get nervous about new challenges. It's okay to feel nervous and confident at the same time. Lucas considered this wisdom. "Is that like how I feel about fourth grade? I like it, but sometimes the math is hard." Exactly like that. Nervous just means we care about doing well. Then it's okay that you're nervous. You'll do great anyway. You always do. The simple faith in his son's voice was humbling. Daniel kissed Lucas's forehead and turned out the light, standing in the doorway for a moment to watch his son settle into sleep. November 1st arrived with clear skies and crisp autumn air. Daniel dressed with extra care, knowing he'd be meeting with his new team and several major clients. He dropped Lucas at school with their usual routine, then headed downtown to begin this new chapter. His new office was on the 16th floor, not far from Whitmore's. It had a window, a door that closed, and furniture that was actually comfortable. Daniel spent a few minutes arranging his space, Lucas's drawings on the bulletin board, family photos on the desk, the books and files he'd brought from his old workspace. At 9 a.m., his assistant knocked and reminded him about his first meeting. Daniel grabbed his materials and headed to the conference room, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was real now. He was vice president of strategic portfolio development, reporting directly to the CEO, responsible for millions in client assets and dozens of employees. The meeting went well. His team was receptive. His ideas were sound. His confidence was genuine. By lunch, Daniel felt like he'd found his footing in this new role. Patricia stopped by his office in the afternoon, grinning widely. "Look at you with the fancy office and the executive floor access. Very impressive." "It still feels surreal." "Enjoy the surreal feeling while it lasts. Soon this will just be normal, and you'll be eyeing the next challenge." She handed him a card. "From everyone on your old team, we wanted to congratulate you properly." Inside the card were messages from Jennifer, Marcus, Amy, and a dozen others he'd worked with over the years. The words were kind and genuine, celebrating his success and expressing confidence in his future. Daniel felt emotion tighten his throat. "Thank you. Tell everyone I said thank you." "Tell them yourself at the reception. Morrison's planning for next week. Apparently promoting someone to VP warrants a party." The reception the following week was more elaborate than Daniel had expected. Catered food, an open bar, remarks from both Morrison and Whitmore about his contributions to the firm. Colleagues from across the company attended, offering congratulations and networking in the way corporate events always encouraged. Whitmore's remarks were brief but pointed. "Daniel Carter exemplifies the qualities we value most at this firm: excellence, integrity, resilience, leadership. He's earned every opportunity he's received, and I have no doubt he'll continue to exceed expectations in his new role. Please join me in congratulating Vice President Carter." The applause was genuine, the congratulations sincere. Daniel stood there surrounded by colleagues and felt the full weight of how far he'd come. Less than a year ago, he'd been terrified of losing his job over an accidental text message. Now he was a vice president being celebrated by the CEO herself. After the reception, as people were leaving, Whitmore approached him one last time. "How does it feel?" "Overwhelming, exciting, terrifying, all of the above." "Good. If you weren't at least a little terrified, I'd worry you didn't understand the responsibility." She paused. "I want you to know something, Daniel. When that text message incident happened, I could have handled it differently. I could have ignored it, or addressed it privately, or any number of other approaches. But I chose to come to your desk publicly because I needed to understand something about you." This caught Daniel completely off guard. "What did you need to understand?" "How you handled pressure, how you responded to unexpected confrontation, whether you'd try to charm your way out of it, or deflect, or own your mistake. She met his eyes directly. You apologized immediately, explained clearly, and took full responsibility without making excuses. That told me everything I needed to know about your character. You were testing me? Not intentionally, but the situation revealed something important nonetheless. Whitmore's expression softened slightly. The text itself was irrelevant. What mattered was that when faced with a potentially career-ending moment, you responded with integrity. That's not something that can be taught or faked. That's who you are fundamentally, and that's why I knew you had the potential for leadership at this level. Daniel processed this revelation. So all of this, the promotion, the opportunities, it started with how I handled that first conversation? It started with the work you'd been doing for 6 years before that. But yes, that moment confirmed my initial assessment of your potential. Everything since then has simply validated that assessment. She extended her hand. Congratulations again, Mr. Carter. I'm looking forward to working with you more directly. They shook hands and Whitmore left to speak with other attendees. Daniel stood there for a moment, understanding something profound. The crisis that had nearly destroyed him had instead become the catalyst for everything that followed. The 3 accidental words that had triggered such chaos had ultimately revealed the truth of who he was, not just to Whitmore and his colleagues, but to himself. He'd survived because he refused to compromise his integrity, even when it would have been easier to lie or make excuses. He'd thrived because he continued doing excellent work regardless of the gossip swirling around him. He'd grown because he faced each challenge with honesty and resilience rather than bitterness or defeat. The evening of the reception, Daniel picked up Lucas from Marie's apartment, where his son had been hanging out during the event. "How was the party?" Lucas asked. "It was nice. Lots of people congratulating me. Some good food, boring speeches." "Did you give a speech?" "A short one. I thanked people for their support and promised to work hard in my new role." "That's good. Always important to thank people." Lucas paused. "Dad, can I ask you something? Do you remember last year when you were really worried about work? When those people were saying mean things about you?" "I remember." "Are you glad that happened? Because if it didn't happen, maybe you wouldn't have gotten all these promotions and stuff." Daniel considered how to answer this. "I'm not glad it happened. It was really hard and hurt a lot. But I'm grateful for what I learned from it. I learned I was stronger than I thought. I learned who my real friends were. I learned that doing the right thing matters, even when it's difficult." He looked at his son. "Sometimes bad things happen, and we can't control that. But we can control how we respond. And if we respond with courage and integrity, sometimes we end up somewhere better than where we started. Like you did. Like I did." They walked home through the November evening, leaves crunching under their feet, and Daniel felt a profound sense of peace. His life wasn't perfect. It never would be. There would be new challenges ahead, new pressures, new obstacles to navigate. But he'd proven to himself that he could handle whatever came. He had Lucas, healthy and happy and thriving. He had a career that was everything he'd worked for and more. He had the respect of people he admired and the knowledge that he'd earned every opportunity through merit and integrity. That was more than enough. That was everything. Later that evening, after Lucas was asleep, Daniel sat in his home office and pulled out the note Whitmore had sent months ago, the one praising his quarterly review. He read it again, then opened his laptop and composed an email. "Ms. Whitmore, I wanted to thank you again for the opportunity you've given me. Not just the promotion, but the chance to prove myself when others had written me off. Your belief in my potential, even during the worst of the crisis last spring, meant more than I can adequately express. I hope to justify that belief through excellent work and continued growth. Thank you for seeing who I could become, even when I couldn't see it myself. Respectfully, Daniel Carter." He hit send before he could second-guess the emotional honesty of the message. The response came 20 minutes later. "Mr. Carter, I saw who you already were. You've simply given yourself permission to operate at that level. The credit is yours, not mine. Keep pushing forward. You have a bright future ahead. V. W." Daniel read the message twice, then closed his laptop and went to check on Lucas one more time. His son slept peacefully, arms wrapped around the stuffed dinosaur that had been his companion since he was 4. This was what mattered. This was what he'd fought for. This quiet moment, this peaceful sleep, this life they'd built together from the wreckage of grief and the chaos of circumstance. The three words that had accidentally started everything, "I miss you," had been meant for Lucas. They'd gone to the wrong person and triggered a cascade of consequences Daniel could never have predicted. But in the end, those words had led him here, to this life, to this success, to this peace. And standing in the doorway of his son's room, watching the gentle rise and fall of Lucas's breathing, Daniel understood something profound. The message had found exactly the right destination after all, not because it went to Vanessa Whitmore, but because it reminded Daniel of what he was working for, what he was fighting to protect, what truly mattered in his life. I miss you. 3 simple words that had nearly destroyed everything. 3 simple words that had ultimately saved everything. 3 simple words that captured the truth at the heart of his life. That love for his son drove every decision, fueled every achievement, and defined every success. Daniel pulled the door closed, leaving it open just a crack the way Lucas preferred, and walked to his own room feeling grateful for the journey that had brought him here. The road ahead would have its challenges, but he'd proven he could handle whatever came. He had his son, he had his integrity, he had his strength. That was enough. That was everything. And tomorrow, when he woke up and started another day as Vice President Daniel Carter, he'd face it the same way he'd faced every challenge since becoming a single father, with love as his foundation, integrity as his guide, and the unwavering belief that doing the right thing always mattered, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The accidental text that had threatened to ruin his life had instead revealed its true meaning, and that meaning was simple, profound, and unshakable. Some things are worth fighting for. Some people are worth protecting. And the love between a father and son is the strongest foundation anyone could ever hope to build upon. Daniel Carter had learned that lesson the hard way, but he'd learned it well, and he'd never forget it.